Hello and welcome to And the Runner-Up Is. This week on the show, we're talking the 2014 Best Actress race at the Academy Awards, where Julianne Moore won for her performance in Still Alice. But why did she beat fellow nominees Marion Cotillard, Felicity Jones, Rosamund Pike, and Reese Witherspoon? We'll explore all this and more today on And the Runner-Up Is. Hello and welcome back to And the Runner-Up Is. I'm your host, Kevin Jacobson, here to talk about the 87th year of Best Actress at the Oscars, which covered the films of 2014. We'll be discussing how Julianne Moore won, why the losers lost, and who we think was the runner-up of this Best Actress race. And my guest today is making his third appearance on the Best Actress series, one of my absolute favorite people to talk with for hours and hours on end about actresses and films. You've heard him covering the Best Actress lineups of 1950 and 1983, founder and editor-in-chief at AwardsWatch, and the guy who is so much happier now that he's dead. Welcome back, Erik Anderson.
What an absolutely appropriate intro. Yes, as the reigning dead actress on this podcast, I'm super excited to be back. This is awesome, actually. I'm really excited.
Yes, me too. And always exciting to talk about modern races. This is now 10 years ago that this happened. It feels like not too long ago, but also it's been 10 years. So
yeah, it's
wild.
It is. This will be the newest conversation that we've had about a film in, I don't know, maybe ever?
Probably. Yeah, I think so. Actually, that might be true. Wow.
Yeah.
But before we talk 2014, let's talk Best Actress as a category. So you've already told me your favorite Best Actress win. You said Shirley Booth in Comeback Little Sheba and Jane Fonda in Clute. You've told me your favorite lineup in this category was 1982, the Meryl Streep Sophie's Choice year. So I have to ask you a third question here, which is kind of more forward-looking. Who is an actress that you think will win the Oscar for Best Actress someday?
So, in thinking about this, I wanted to kind of eliminate Amy Adams and Glenn Close from the conversation. It feels a little obvious, and I certainly would never, if you're going to partake in this, I wouldn't want to steal that thunder in any way.
Thank you.
But yeah, I do. I mean, I think either of them clearly has a potential path. But when I thought about this, the two names that came up immediately were Michelle Williams and Saoirse Ronan, who just feel they are on absolute real paths in kind of a Kate Winslet kind of way. Obviously, Ronan a little more in that vein, I think. So I think Ronan might be, of those two, the closest. But then I also thought Sandra Hüller is absolutely broken through now, and I think she could find a way regardless of what language she's speaking.
I completely agree. I could also randomly see Sandra Hüller just sweeping the supporting actress category someday, just being a total scene stealer. But yeah, definitely someone who could do both. But yeah, Saoirse Ronan, obviously someone who's always kind of going to be in the discussion, sort of like what Kate Winslet was in the 2000s. So I definitely agree with your thinking there. So yeah. And Michelle Williams is someone who could very easily be like that, like what she did with Fosse Verdon of just sweeping all the awards.
I'd be really
being undeniable
too.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, and knocking out a killer speech like she did at the Emmys. So yeah, I like that. Well, my other question, you told me your most heartbreaking loss in this category was Judy Garland for A Star is Born and also Glenn Close for Dangerous Liaisons. Thank you very much. And your most heartbreaking snub was naturally Madonna for Evita, very on brand. But this time I'm going to ask you, who do you want to win Best Actress that hasn't already?
This is somebody that I wanted to put in the first question, but I don't know if it's realistic or not. So I have her here instead with a couple of other people, and that is Michelle Pfeiffer. I really,
Yeah.
in thinking about her nominations, good and bad, and some of the unfortunate choices that she made for roles that she has passed on,
Yeah.
part of me is like,
So
maybe
many.
you don't deserve it, Michelle. Maybe you're just making bad choices. But
Wow.
I like her too much. I would love to see it happen. But then I also really want someone who hasn't had enough attention, like Alfre Woodard, to be able to have
Absolutely.
a good film comeback. That kind of clemency was supposed to really be for her. And it was just bad timing and bad campaigning, not campaigning on
Mm.
her part, but just a bad campaign. And Toni Collette, can we do something to get Toni Collette back into this that isn't juror number two, even though she's good in it? That's what I want.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, Michelle Pfeiffer is someone, she's in that boat of like the Annette Benings and the Glenn Closes and the Sigourney Weavers of like that late 80s era that it feels like their time kind of passed, but also there's still some hope. I don't know. It's really tough. But yeah, always holding out hope for Michelle. And Alfre is incredible in Clemency and would have been a fantastic winner in 2019, quite frankly.
Yep.
So we're gonna hold out hope for all of them. And I think maybe the ones you think are going to win are a lot more likely ultimately, but would love to see if we can look back on this conversation years from now and be like, hey, Michelle Williams, or not Michelle Williams, Michelle Pfeiffer, and even Alfre Woodard, like how exciting. So,
I love it.
well, let us get to the topic at hand here. The 87th Academy Awards, the Best Actress nominees were Marion Cotillard in 2 Days, One Night, Felicity Jones in The Theory of Everything, Julianne Moore in Still Alice, Rosamund Pike in Gone Girl, and Reese Witherspoon in Wild, with the winner being Julianne Moore. So before we break down these performances, Eric, what are your overall thoughts from this lineup? If you can recall your thoughts then, how they've changed now, whatever you want to discuss.
I mean, I think we'll go into some more specific things because I mean,
Yeah.
I have a connection to this category and win that I feel is a little unique and kind of fun. But looking at it as an overall category that year, it was crazy that it's only 10 years ago that we had yet another group of 5 nominees where the majority were sole nominees of their film. And it was just such a marker of what we would see a lot, which is best picture nominees that are just not women driven films, and they would be plucked out of their films for recognition, but in a way was kind of so much more insulting than just it's never something that I like to see, even though if it's a great performance, it's a great performance. That doesn't matter. But just the way that the Academy views female leads versus male leads continues to be a point of ire. This is only 10 years ago, and 3 of them were sole nominees, and I don't think they should have been sole nominees. So
yeah,
it's.
And then you have one where they only had one other nomination, and it was kind of a surprise nomination in the case of Wild with Laura Dern.
Yes,
so,
and that's the whole what that created itself was such a kind of fun thing, because we wouldn't have Big Little Lies, we wouldn't have Laura Dern as an Emmy and an Oscar winner, honestly, without Wild. So you take the good, you take the bad.
Yes, indeed.
But yes, I was really excited for this category because obviously, as a huge Julianne Moore stan, the cards were falling into place in a way that they hadn't really before. So yeah, I was excited for what it could be at the time, and then obviously for what the outcome was. Spoiler alert.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think this is a pretty good lineup overall. It's another one where in the moment it's kind of a dull race to track because Julianne Moore just won everything and there was never a chance for an upset, really. Yeah, I mean, also it is kind of to that point worth noting that as of now, she is the most recent example, I believe, of a solo nominee to win this category. So I think that's progress.
Yes.
But, I think it is an interesting group. Excited to see both Marion Cotillard and Reese Witherspoon back after their wins in the 2000s, and especially exciting to see Marion because that nomination was far from guaranteed and sort of became like this grassroots, to Leslie before to Leslie thing that a lot of actors made happen. Felicity Jones is here getting her first nomination and at least nominated in lead while being a kind of wife role that's typically relegated to supporting. And then we have Rosamund Pike, kind of surviving the complete collapse of Gone Girl at the Oscars, which was kind of crushing to see as a fan of that movie. But she survived, as she does. But like you said, it really speaks to how homogenized this lineup was to male stories, or just overall at the Oscars this year, and white male stories especially. And this is obviously one of the first of 2 years of Oscars So White, so there's a lot of discussions being had here. But just disappointing to not have Gone Girl or 2 Days, One Night or Wild getting more nominations just beyond these performances, because I think all of them deserved more. I don't know. I think this category just feels very disconnected from the story of 2014. You know what I mean? Like Oscar-wise, which is kind of a shame.
Yeah, it was also strange because I did all of these rewatches this week because I'm, basically Julianne Moore and Still Alice. And if I don't watch something and take notes, it didn't even happen.
Sure. You are still Erik.
I am still Erik. But the way that so many of these movies behind the scenes and theme and subject wise started kind of interconnecting was something I hadn't thought about at the time that it was happening. But the concentration of watching them all together was fascinating. Obviously the ALS that Stephen Hawking has, Richard Glatzer, the director of Still Alice, had while he was making it, and died a year later. Maybe I'm just getting ahead of myself. There's, suicide attempts in 2 and how they're handled. I wasn't thinking about connections really quite like what I found this week. And that was kind of a good thing. It was a fun thing.
Yeah, that's always fun, especially to have that perspective when you're not totally in on like every single day following the race.
Yeah.
Sometimes you get a little narrow focused, I suppose. And yeah, we're kind of seeing the bigger picture here. Obviously, Reese Witherspoon also produced 2 of the films here with Wild and Gone Girl. So interesting to explore how she could have done in Gone Girl. We'll talk about that maybe later. But yeah, shall we jump into it here?
Let's do it.
All right. Well, we're starting with Marion Cotillard in 2 Days, One Night. Okay, Marion getting her second Oscar nomination 7 years after her win for La Vie en Rose. So after that win, Hollywood really became interested in her, and she made quite a few English language films in the aftermath, such as Public Enemies, 9, which she got some awards recognition for, Inception, which was a big blockbuster hit, Midnight in Paris, a Best Picture nominee, Contagion, another quasi-hit, Dark Knight Rises, which she didn't really get the best notices for, but still, it's like, hit after hit, a lot of success in between these 2 nominations, really becoming a Hollywood presence at this time. And she also had success with critics and with awards groups for Rust and Bone, where she got every precursor nomination for, but didn't get that Oscar nomination. The Immigrant came out in 2014, just like 2 Days, One Night, and quite a few critics tied them together, those 2 performances, when they gave her the wins this year. And then, 2 Days, One Night is a very acclaimed performance, and she had a much rockier path to the nomination than she would have for Rust and Bone, but she still got in at the end here. We'll probably talk more about that later, but for 2 Days, One Night, Marion is working with the Dardenne brothers, who previously produced Rust and Bone, and they've long been known for working with lesser known actors, so it was a pretty big deal that they brought in Marion for the lead role. And so the story of 2 Days, One Night is she is playing a French-speaking Belgian woman named Sandra. she has a husband and 2 kids, and she works at a solar panel factory, but she's taken some time off due to her ongoing struggle with depression. And when she's finally cleared to go back to work, she finds out that her boss has grown accustomed to work life without her and giving her coworkers extra hours to make up for her absence. And her boss offered up a vote to either allow Sandra to come back to work or accept a bonus to their paycheck. And most of them naturally voted for the bonus. So Sandra is able to get the boss to agree to a revote on Monday so that she can talk to her fellow employees over the weekend to persuade them to change their vote and allow her back at her job. So the film is just kind of exploring her going from coworker to coworker, pleading her case. So let's start this off here. Marion Cotillard, this was the surprise, like I said, pleasant surprise for many on nominations morning. So tell me your thoughts on Marion Cotillard as an actress and her performance here.
So I mean, I love Cotillard's Oscar win, very much, very deserved. Like you were mentioning right after that, Hollywood really would just wanted to put her in everything. And I think I think they didn't really know what to do with her. And bless her agent for putting her in everything of major directors and major films. But it never felt like we were finding out who Marianne Cotillard was. It was a huge discovery with La Vie en Rose, but from that point, if that's your first time seeing her, you kind of want to work backwards to discover who she is outside of that. And we weren't really able to do that with the types of movies that she was in, with Nine and Dark Knight and Inception. Those were not showcases to show us who Marianne Cotillard was at all. This was. Rust and Bone was too, for sure. And I think she, and obviously her people, kind of realized it's like, we need to maybe dial back a bit so that we can discover who she is and she can discover who she is. And I think what she does in 2 Days, One Night and the Dardennes choice to cast her, because they do cast just absolute brand new people that have never even seen a film camera before. And that works to their aesthetic incredibly well because it's stripped down, no music, they're Belgian, but it's like if you ask somebody what a French movie looks like, they would say it's this, because it just is this type of hard cuts, no music, long takes, static camera and moving camera, morose, but not all the way to the point of being absolutely trauma porn, which is what this is. Stops close of that at every possible moment. And it's like a thriller, like a ticking clock thriller, but without the extra added music or tension. The tension entirely comes from the roller coaster of her making these visits and getting close to the votes that she needs to get, and then falling back another few steps and then going forward another few steps. And there's something about the mundanity of Dardenne films that is so extremely relatable. And Cotillard never, ever, ever is distracting as a big name lead in this. It isn't that she's extra deglammed, because she's just in a tank top and no makeup, but it's not in a way that is like a Hollywood deglam. It is, like all of their films, incredibly naturalistic. It is a naturalistic performance from the first moment to the very, very last. I think it is a better performance than La Vie en Rose, which is something I absolutely love. And it is apples to oranges in comparison. Yeah. But I think that she does something it's miraculous what she does here. And that is not rely on a persona or being the most famous person on set here. It's
right.
A perfect performance.
I agree. This is a phenomenal performance, and I haven't rewatched this in the 10 years that it's since its release, so I had forgotten some elements of the film, but kind of in my mind's eye, I remembered it being very understated and subtle and just one of those performances that wasn't overtly showy, but still kind of, obviously impactful in its own way. So it actually kind of surprised me in a good way, just how locked in she felt for me from the very beginning and really establishes everything you need to know about who her character is and how she goes about the world and her struggle with depression. It's just really impressive to me and very unglamorous. And we know that she can transform obviously from La Vie en Rose and go very deep into a character like that, but she's so larger than life, and a lot of the roles that she took kind of in the aftermath of that just had that kind of classical leading lady sort of appeal to them generally. So with this, it's really like there's just no trace really of her being a famous Oscar winning star. I feel like she really just right away is showing her self-loathing, and this storm of like emotions that are going on inside as she is like talking to her friend on the phone right at the start in that first scene and realizing she doesn't have the support of her coworkers to return. And, it's like telling herself not to cry, but in a way that's very kind of harsh in a way. It's like she's in this cycle of being very easily moved to cry, but that just makes her feel weak and helpless, and that fact just makes her cry even more, which is this very vicious cycle. And I think a very real thing when you have depression, and she gets at that despair. And yeah, I guess I just forgot how quickly we're just like off to the races with the plot, with her character, and just like realizing what she has to do. Like there's really not much buildup. We're just dropped in the middle, and we have to sort of pick up the pieces of the dynamic here. But yeah, she just feels so just locked in from the start.
It is, and I love that element of it, that we don't have that set up, because it's one thing that they're really good at, and that Cotillard establishes so well, is that we don't need that. We need so little, because it is tapping into any person's feeling of self-worth, and it's tapping into hers at the most vulnerable time that it could possibly happen. So what more do you really need to be able to connect to somebody than having to not only be stressed and worried that you are losing your job as you're trying to come out of depression, but then now you have a matter of hours before you can go and be a salesperson to people that are going to say no to your face, some that are going to be incredibly warm and sympathetic. I think about the soccer guy.
Yeah.
Over the last 10 years, I've thought about that moment so many times. It's just so beautiful.
It is.
Yeah. And it's hard to not be instantly relatable what she's going through. I don't need the setup. I just need to be in it, and I need to be in it with her. And
yeah,
you are.
Yeah, and you fully trust her, in that way. And it's fascinating just her arc of watching someone really starting at rock bottom and truly just despairing, and then just gradually sort of stirring up the courage to lobby for her job. But it's like, again, in the beginning, like really just on the verge of tears through so much, if not fully crying about how hopeless her situation is. And it's not, I don't think it's specifically about this job necessarily. It's that, she's been nearly unanimously like voted out of her job by her coworkers, who she presumably had built up relationships with. And for someone who already suffers from depression, it's like a really rough blow to then be told that you don't even matter enough to keep your job here. And yeah, there's just like an anguish, I think, in her face that can be unpleasant at times, but it's raw and it's very unvarnished in that great sort of social realism style.
And I mean, I could not help, but think about, and you will understand this, that it starts to feel very quickly like an episode of Survivor, where she has to find her alliance and create the numbers, because she is on the bottom of the tribe. And there's 14 votes or whatever it is, and she needs half, or 16 votes. So she needs, half plus one. She needs the majority, like you would if
Yeah,
it was Survivor. And so she's going around getting numbers, and everybody is, well, who else is voting with you?
exactly.
They need somebody else to say yes before they say yes. And it really is that. It really is this game of Survivor for her. And I just kind of love that. And I obviously,
I
thinking
love it too.
of you as a Survivor fan,
Yes.
that's yeah.
Yeah.
I had to mention it.
That is what's interesting, is that like when she, for example, like she calls the first coworker and they actually give her a bit of hope, the look on her face when she's realizing she can actually do this, I think is really beautifully done. And so many times I feel like the Dardens sort of linger on her face, and she sort of is sitting in the anxiety of not knowing how any of these conversations are going to go. Like they could really go either way. Like I think of the scene of her just sitting on the bus, and we just kind of sit there with her for just like in the silence of that, which is so powerful. And she's just like a bundle of nerves, because like she doesn't want to be doing this. She hates being forced into this position, but she truly has no other choice than to basically just like go on the campaign trail. And I don't think she really thinks of herself as like a politician necessarily. So it's hard for her to get to that place. And it's like every conversation she has with people that goes a little negative, or like they're not really promising that they'll be on her side, she's kind of just like, I get it. It's not like she can really put up a fight, because it's like she probably would have been in the same situation if someone else had asked for her vote. And she's like, I gotta get paid too. I need that bonus too. So there's that great tension there. I think that she really is very nuanced and exploring.
Absolutely, because her losing her job, is going to put their family into some dire straits. And
Right.
the people that say no say, I that's the position that I'm in. So what choice does she have? She's never angry or defensive about anybody
Right.
that's saying no, because she's literally in the same boat.
That's what makes it so tricky. And just imagining her like on Survivor, just kind of like going around and not exactly knowing how conversations will go. If I go too aggressive with this one person, maybe this will backfire on me somehow. So I don't know. I just find that social dynamic really fascinating. Just
And
saying.
you were mentioning the scene on the bus. So many of these conversations that she has are single cut one takes.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's a function of cinematography that is one of those things that doesn't allow you to look away. It's not, going to cut to the next thing. You're there, and you become incredibly invested. And yeah, it's one of
Yeah.
the most effective things that this film does, and there are so many. And I loved reading that she would shoot some of these scenes dozens of times, and these long takes of just pure, like, scraped skin, raw emotion, and being able to do them
Yeah.
50 times, that's insane. That's like David Fincher crazy.
Yeah. Very, very exposing.
Yeah.
More on Fincher later.
Mm-hmm.
Um, well, I mean, I also want to talk about what I think is great in her performance, is that you can actually kind of see the mental strain and the sort of psychological effects of this situation, and that also having an effect on her physical wellness in a way, which I think can happen. I can actually say that it's happened to me before, as someone who's like dealt with anxiety and things. Like the body reacts kind of in strange ways at times. So it's like we have this repeating motif almost of her having to drink water, and her throat sort of closing up, and how all of this is so draining to her energy levels, which I think she just plays very accurately. I forgot about that whole aspect of the film too, just like how much we see her like chugging water.
Well, your body starts revolting against you, and
Yeah.
she
Yeah.
presents that really, really, really well. And I mean, I guess we talk spoilers, so we can
Yes.
like talk whatever we want.
Yeah.
Um, she
10-year-old
has,
movies.
yeah, exactly. She has a suicide attempt in this that is so, again, because there's no music, there's no setup, it's just very matter of fact. It it isn't even jarring, but it is a shocking moment because you are tapping into a lot of people's possible history and feelings and how easy it can be to feel like it would be really easy if this was just over, and it would be easy for everybody else if this was just over. And that's how it is. That's how it's presented. It is really that matter of fact. And it is in one of those roller coaster moments where she's had some highs and some hopes and then really big lows that seem insurmountable. And she takes the pills and there's hope again, and she's like, I just took a bunch of pills.
Yeah.
It's done just so non-exploitatively. And
Hmm.
I never felt that the sympathy that I'm having and empathy I'm having was not earned, that it was forced in any way. And that can happen really, really easily with a lot of uh movies that have suicidal ideation in them, where it's, we'll talk about one at the end of
Yes, I
this,
was gonna say. Yep.
of how it is. But then, stories, each story is different, and not everybody has to tell it
True.
that way. It has to be appropriate for the story that you're telling.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a moment that is strangely not even the most sympathetic moment in the movie. And I think that is one of its greatest successes, because I think in another story, this would be like the thing, the moment, but it's not. It's just something that happens.
Yeah. And that's what makes this such a
Mm.
quietly well directed film, really. And another thing is that I like is how the film kind of presents Jean-Marc, the foreman, as this kind of like unseen villain, like working behind the scenes and like whipping the votes to make sure she's not voted back into work. And we never actually see him until the very end,
Yeah.
but definitely speaks to a very toxic work environment that, he's like intimidating the employees and sort of implying this retaliation if they do vote with Sandra, and her just trying her best to like cut through that influence with people. It's such a difficult thing to kind of break that spell there and get people to stick their neck out against the leader in a way. And
Yeah.
over time, as she just becomes more and more frustrated with all of his meddling, and it just starts to feel personal, and gets to the point at the end where she does something she probably never would have done beforehand, which is kind of call him out directly to his face. And it's such a fiery moment that I think the film really kind of builds up to very naturally, that in a film that she rarely feels that assertive and direct, it just feels like this earned sort of catharsis, I think.
And it's funny because if you watch their films and films like this, I think there can be an expectation that the ending is going to be absolutely sour and horrible, and here's the lesson you just watched, an hour and 45 minutes so that you could be fully depressed by the end. But
Yeah.
no, you're watching a woman with no self-confidence and self-worth find it by the end. And the outcome is not that she gets her job back, because she does get her job back, but it's at a price that she doesn't want somebody else to pay. So
Right.
it goes all the way back to the beginning of her being in the same position as any of the other employees would be in. And yeah, that boss has toyed with her these 2 days
And one night.
and one night, and sort of, he sort of gives her this, like, well done, and because it
Yeah.
was so well done, I'm going to let you keep your job and everyone keep their bonus, and then I get to look like the really kind of good guy, awesome guy.
Right.
But somebody is actually going to lose their job as a result, and we know who it's going to be because it's the fixed term contract guy who was
Mm-hmm.
scared to vote with her because of that. And she makes the right choice. She makes the choice that a lot of people were not willing to make for her at the beginning, and then were able to make for her mostly about that half. It was half and half, 8-8. And I don't know. I don't know how you can't be more happy with that choice
Yeah.
as a viewer
She's
and
happy.
as a person.
She says she's happy.
And she's
Yeah.
happy. She is
Yeah.
smiling. She is so happy by the end of it. And how is that not perfect?
This is a story of a woman self-actualizing, which we love to see in this
Yes,
category.
exactly. On this podcast, in this category, just
In life.
in life.
Yes. We love to see it. Yeah. And presented in a way that doesn't feel, too super cheesy or anything, or, it's a very different, it's kind of self-actualizing to Wild, for example, which is also a great movie, I think, but it's just like kind of night and day in its presentation, I think, of that type of journey necessarily. So yeah, hopefully she moves on and hopefully finds a job with a less toxic workplace, and we can move on with her life.
I
And
hope so
yeah,
too.
the journey was worth it to get to this place. So yeah, I love this nomination. Love that the Oscars and whoever was behind the scenes, I think it was like Julia
Jane
Roberts
Fonda.
and people. Right.
Jane
Yes.
Fonda was huge. I remember Jane Fonda
Yeah.
more than anybody being absolutely so super behind this nomination and getting her in. Love
Once again, she's on the right side of history.
it. Exactly.
So hopefully we can get another nomination from Marion Cotillard. It's been 10 years now, so we'll see. But, she's always doing interesting work, I think. So, okay. Well, let's move on to our next nominee, Miss Felicity Jones in The Theory of Everything. Okay, so our first of two introductions for this episode, Felicity Jones getting her first and so far only Oscar nomination here. So she was born in England. She was born in Birmingham, and she started acting pretty early on in TV. Her first role was at the age of 12 in a TV movie. She was on a show called The Worst Witch. She was in a handful of stage roles. She did radio work. Her first films were in 2008, including a small role in Brideshead Revisited. She was in other films like Sherry, speaking of Michelle Pfeiffer, The Tempest, Cemetery Junction, and she had a bit of a breakthrough recognition with her lead role in Like Crazy, which won her a handful of awards in 2011. She went on to co-lead The Invisible Woman in 2013, which was a costume design nominee, lest we forget. But yeah, lots of costume dramas, kind of in the vein of like the Keira Knightleys and the Carey Mulligans to a certain extent. But also in 2014, she had a small role in The Amazing Spider-Man 2, which I totally forgot about. But this is kind of where she had her major breakthrough with The Theory of Everything. And this is a biopic about the lives of Stephen Hawking, the famous physicist and author and icon, and his first wife, Jane Hawking. So apparently Felicity said she was kind of engrossed by the script and auditioned for the role outright, and the director, James Marsh, just offered it to her pretty much right after. And she also met with the real Jane Hawking to prepare. So yeah, The Theory of Everything, like I said, it's about the love story of Stephen and Jane Hawking. Eddie Redmayne plays Stephen. Felicity Jones plays Jane as they meet at the University of Cambridge and they get into a relationship. Pretty soon after that, Stephen starts to develop some muscle weakness and a lack of coordination and is diagnosed with motor neuron disease and given a life expectancy of 2 years. And Jane decides she wants to stick by him through it all, even as his condition gradually worsens. So they marry, they have 2 kids, and while Stephen is becoming this world-famous physician, Jane kind of is putting her dreams on the back burner to support her husband and the kids, but things become complicated when she meets a dashing man named Jonathan, played by Charlie Cox, who enters her and Stephen's life, and she starts to develop feelings for him, as he does for her, naturally. So let's talk Felicity Jones. Eric, thoughts on Felicity overall as an actress and her performance in The Theory of Everything?
My thoughts overall on Felicity Jones as an actress are kind of non-existent. I don't care for her. I feel like she is like a C-list version of British actresses of her era and that are better. I am pretty consistently unimpressed with her. I do like crazy.
Hmm.
I do think that is good, and that she's good in it. There's there's something about her that just feels like put on. Like, why wasn't this Claire Foy or somebody else? And I kind of feel like that almost all the time that I see her, is that why was this not somebody else doing this? And so I'm really unimpressed with her here. But more, I think maybe even more unimpressed with her is that I just think that Jane Hawkins as a character is so incredibly underwritten. There is it is the worst type of suffering wife role that just marked decades of nominations, usually in supporting. Uh,
Right.
and not to go all Joey Gentili, but this is a supporting role. This is not a lead role. It's just not.
Okay.
It's based on her own book, but she is not a lead here. She just isn't. And part of that is she's just not written compellingly enough. She doesn't have agency enough of her own. And it's not till like literally the very, very, very end that she does. And it's not that it isn't earned, it isn't valued up to that point, because the focus is Eddie Redmayne and that performance and that role. So I felt this way when I saw it. She's had 10 years of performances since then, and revisiting it made it even stronger, that I just think that she is weak, and she's not supposed to be in this. She is supposed to be stalwart and strong and the thing that keeps him going. And I never, ever feel that, either from the character or from her at all. And that is the opposite of what we were just talking about, and what we want in this category, and what we want for women and characters. It's sad, honestly. But yeah, I don't like this performance. I don't like her.
Wonderful. All right. Well,
That was so much nicer than I had originally planned, honestly.
that's saying something. Wow. All right. Well, I would call myself a Felicity Jones agnostic. I have enjoyed her in some things. I think she's weirdly kind of good in Rogue One, which is a few years after this.
Oh yeah, yeah.
She definitely has some charm to her, and she has a tenacity that does work sometimes. Sometimes it falls flat. Ultimately, just kind of in the words of Baby Clyde, talking about Rooney Mara a few episodes ago, Felicity Jones leaves me cold as an actress, personally. Not to keep piling on here, but I just don't feel a very distinct sort of force of personality there. And it is possible to be understated and not be a loud performer, but still be compelling, obviously, as I felt with people like Michelle Williams, or honestly, Rooney Mara as well, and Catalina Sandina Moreno. Like, there's plenty of ways to be understated and still fascinate me. For me, Felicity is not necessarily that actress, and I don't know. It's nothing against her. I just don't really vibe with her necessarily. And yeah, The Theory of Everything was probably the first time I saw her. I don't recall seeing anything she had done before 2014. So felt like a real introduction, but not a very memorable one ultimately. I think she is perfectly fine here. I think the role is really tough because it is a return to the what if there was a wife trope, that so she's kind of saddled with the suffering wife role. And even though she does get quite a bit of screen time, I think ultimately I don't feel particularly moved by her compared to even actresses like, obviously that have won supporting actress, like a Marcia Gay Harden in Pollock, certainly, or even a Jennifer Connelly in A Beautiful Mind, for that matter.
Well,
I just,
this is a carbon copy
yeah,
of
right.
of that too, and
Yeah. I just think the film is very flawed ultimately because it wants to be a different kind of biopic by centering the love story rather than this great man's accomplishments necessarily, but it just falls into so many cliches, especially when it comes to Jane, that it just doesn't feel equal to me, like it's kind of purporting to be. And it is technically Jane's story that they've adapted from her book, but I never would have guessed that, like if I didn't know that going into it, because we barely even really get to know Jane. I find like we have this vague sense of her ambitions and her interest in literature, but it doesn't really scratch the surface, and the story just becomes about him and his physical wellness and her just attending to him and eventually kind of getting impatient. And I guess she has more interesting things to do towards the middle to end of the film, but yeah, I guess a lot of it just falls flat for me. Like, I don't actually think it's a bad performance necessarily, but I wouldn't single this out as one of the best of the year by any means.
Yeah, I don't think it is a bad performance. It just is. It just doesn't leave any type of marker or impact. And I mean, again, it is really such a huge part of that is the character as written. Anthony McCartan wrote this adaptation, and he has written things that do really well at the Oscars. But I mean, I think Redmayne has more compelling relationships with Charlie Cox and Harry Lloyd, who plays his school friend. There's something more going on with them than there is with Jane. And yeah, as far as the filmmaking style, it's sort of it's the opposite of 2 Days, One Night in so many ways. Where we, talked about that didn't have any setup. We were just kind of thrown right into it, and that was the thing. And we were only dealing with 2 days, and that's kind of how you had to do it. This is multiple decades, although it really almost never feels like it's really that long until it suddenly is. But this has sweeping music, and that feels
Oscar nominated.
Yeah, and R.I.P. Johan Johansson. I do
lovely score out of context. I think
yes,
but
it feels like the score feels like Downton Abbey meets The Great British Baking Show, where it's so absolutely British, like so much, and it moves physically with the camera movement in a way that just it doesn't leave really anything for the viewer to discover. It is, here is what it is, and here is what you need to feel right now. So it doesn't, not that every movie has to be challenging, but this is like the least challenging style of filmmaking and the most classically boring biopic style of filmmaking. Is it effective then, or is it not? I don't know. I think Redmayne is really good. I actually really like him here, although just obviously because I'm watching it now, at first I kept thinking of pommel horse guy from the Olympics, Stephen Jodorowsky, like way too much. I'm like, why? No, this is not the right context here. But I do like his performance. It is a meticulously physical performance that I think is pretty fantastic. But he's the movie. It's his movie. It is not hers.
Yeah. And he worked very hard to get that Oscar.
Yes.
As you once described on this very podcast, he was craven for that Oscar.
We don't call him Eddie Red Carpet for no reason.
I know, that's right. Yes. So it's definitely hard to, like, even watching it with the context of I'm watching this for Felicity Jones' performance. It's hard to not just kind of get distracted by his performance, the score, the not very satisfying storytelling style. If I were to say some positives, I do think the best part of her performance is when she is communicating how frustrated she is over this situation and just becoming really testy with him and snapping, or like when she's like vacuuming aggressively and like sassing back at her mom, Emily Watson, and like when she tells her she should join the church choir or something so she has an outlet for something other than just attending to Stephen. And you see her just kind of like processing that. I do think she communicates that like grit and like the tenacity pretty well. It's just all the other stuff just feels so underbaked that I don't know if I can really blame her or just the writing more, but I do think a more compelling screen actress could have drawn out more that was not in the script, you know?
Yeah, there's the scene at near the end where he has to go to America to get another award, and she's like really excited and having her own moment, and then he's like, yeah, and I'm bringing this other woman.
Yeah.
And I mean, his choice of timing is so absolutely terrible to tell her that right then.
Yep.
And how Jane handles it, well, how Felicity Jones handles it via Jane. I do have some respect for it not going into, plate throwing territory, to be like, here's my moment, here I'm grabbing it, but it then errs on the other side of being so passive,
Right.
that this is the woman at the very beginning when she's trying to date him that says, if you don't play this game with me, I'm never coming back. I'm never coming back to see you. Where is she at? Because she's not in that moment where she should be. I don't know. It's just, there's just so many miscalculations with something that has like a textbook structure. Like it's a 2-hour film and the main inciting incident happens in 30 minutes. And then we have the second act. Everything is very, very straightforward. Yet she is so underwritten.
Yeah, she does, I think, get the sort of weird feeling of kind of having grown apart from Steven in a way by the end, but also kind of realizing like she has invested so much into this. She has invested so much of her life and put her dreams on hold for him and for the kids. And now he's just kind of moving on.
Yeah.
That I think there's a sort of bittersweet feeling that she does nail pretty well. And they kind of have like this amicable breakup, which from what I understand was like much more bitter and rancorous in real life, which I think actually would have been interesting to explore. But just like everything in the film, it's just so surface level, and we never really dive deep enough into the complexities of this dynamic and this like weird modern arrangement that they have with her and, Charlie Cox and what they've got going on too. It's just, there's like one conversation about it that's like vaguely hinted at, but I just wish there was more, to quote another film from this year. I thought there would be more.
I thought there would be more. Exactly that. Yeah, I mean, I like Charlie Cox a lot, but they almost want to make Stephen Hawking just kind of like a cuck while that's happening around there, but it doesn't until it kind of does, and they're already so completely split at that point, and he has already been with other women. But again, so much of that is unshown because it is a varnished version.
Very.
That she is unwilling to, it's her own book, but she's unwilling to show through, whatever conversations that she had with Stephen Hawking and what that would look like too. But I mean, once the rights are bought, you can kind of do almost anything with it. So, but they were both alive, so
right.
It was,
that's the thing,
very, very careful, versus something else that McCartan wrote, which was Bohemian Rhapsody, where then you get to do whatever you want with the dead lead because they can't say anything about it. And that is always the pratfall and the danger of a biopic, is that if your subject is alive and you need the rights through them, or if they are not alive and you need the rights through the estate, you are bound generally by the type of storytelling that you're going to tell. And it's just so many missed opportunities here.
Yeah, I think so too. And it's a bummer because there is an interesting story to be explored here, I think.
Yeah.
And even try to weave in some of his actual work because he's a very influential and brilliant mind, and yet we barely even scratched the surface of that even. So I can't imagine some people going to this movie for an exploration of him and his mind felt very satisfied by it. So I don't know. I think it is definitely a lot of missed opportunities, and if there was someone else cast in the role of Jane, maybe there could have been something that they could have elevated there, but unfortunately I just didn't feel that with Felicity.
It still would have been the same underwritten character, and that can be just really, it sometimes doesn't matter who the performer is. You can barely do more than something that's not on the page.
Yeah. So we shall see if she gets another nomination, perhaps as early as next year.
I was going to mention I have seen The Brutalist. So to kind of have a full circle with this rewatch and what I feel about her.
And what kind of role is that in The Brutalist?
It is, let's see, let me look at notes. It is a long-suffering wife role, except she's the one in the wheelchair this time.
Oh.
Yeah. And there are moments with that are, let's just say, questionable. I love the film. I think it's it's one of my favorites of the year. She is not good. And all I could think about was the actresses that should have been doing it instead. And that's what this was too. So I'm just not on the Felicity Jones train. That I'm not even at the station.
Well, let's move on to our next nominee, shall we? I think you're ready to do that.
Yes.
This is quite a hard pivot here into Rosamund Pike for Gone Girl. Alrighty. Also getting her first nomination, arguably by the skin of her teeth, based on how Gone Girl did overall with nominations, but we'll discuss that later. So to introduce Rosamund, she was born in Hammersmith in London. She was a child of opera singers, very posh. But she kind of actually struggled to get into the theater school she applied to, but she eventually got in Oxford education and did theater work, Shakespeare. She acted in and directed plays while at school. She broke through in British television in the late 90s, and then her film debut was as Miranda Frost in Die Another Day. Not a bad debut. So she co-starred in Pride and Prejudice as Jane. She was in films like Fracture, An Education, Barney's Version, Maiden Dagenham, plus some blockbusters like Jack Reacher and Wrath of the Titans. Kind of all over the place. Lead roles, supporting roles. And people sort of knew her, but she didn't quite have that signature role yet until we got to Gone Girl, which is David Fincher's adaptation of the best-selling novel by Gillian Flynn. And Rosamund was chosen largely because she wasn't as well known to American audiences, especially. There were many, many names considered, highly sought after, just like with his previous film with Lisbeth Salander. So, as mentioned previously, Reese Witherspoon was initially attached, but she ultimately passed because she felt like she wasn't right for the role, but she still had a producer credit here. Other names apparently in the mix included Charlize Theron, Natalie Portman, Emily Blunt, Rooney Mara again, Olivia Wilde, Abby Cornish, and my favorite, Julianne Hough.
I can't even think about the nightmare that would have been.
Would have loved to have seen it, how that worked out. But for David Fincher, Rosamund was absolutely the number one choice, especially, he said, for her enigmatic quality. So Gone Girl, psychological thriller about this couple, Nick and Amy Dunn, played by Ben Affleck and Rosamund Pike. Amy is known for being the subject of her parents' children's books, Amazing Amy. One day, specifically on their 5th anniversary, Amy goes missing and an investigation is launched into her disappearance. And the police put together the evidence and come to the conclusion that Nick may have murdered Amy. So Nick and his twin sister Margot, Carrie Coon, try to prove his innocence, and we get flashbacks with Amy's point of view to see her side of the story. But, of course, things take a drastic turn about an hour in that shifts the whole narrative. So Gone Girl, big one here, highly discussed, highly debated, definitely, I would say, easily the buzziest film of these nominees, especially 10 years later. But yeah, tell me your thoughts on Rosamund as an actress and her big sort of career-defining performance here.
I am a huge fan of Rosamund Pike, and weirdly, there is a sort of Marion Cotillard element where Hollywood wasn't quite sure what to do with her either, because she
Definitely
is
not.
all over the place, and that isn't specifically like, oh, she's so versatile, she can do everything. It was, I think everybody trying to find a way to pigeonhole her without and making that decision themselves so that she wasn't just locked into the period costume drama vibe, which she probably could have been. She probably could have spent a good portion of her career just doing Jane Austen's like over and over again. And I think at this time, yeah, if you would think about Rosamund Pike, you would think about An Education, you think about Pride and Prejudice, probably more than anything. And I think,
You wouldn't think about Barney's version? Hello.
probably not too much. I mean, yes, obviously I think about Die Another Day because of Madonna as
Yes,
well. I mean, duh.
of course.
But no, I think that's kind of, that was her, the overall knowledge really of her was those two. And that is a trapping. That is a trapping that can be hard to get out of. That kind of happened with Kate Winslet, and she made such a very concerted effort to get out of that, because it is a trapping.
I think Carey Mulligan did too, actually,
Absolutely. And
after An Education, like Drive and Shame and
there's
Inside Llewyn Davis. Yeah.
they almost had like a parallel run here, Pike
Yeah.
and Mulligan, and that they had gotten to do things together. It makes it even better. So I am a fan of Pike. I think she has, like her posh upbringing sort of gives, she has that air about her. She's really tall, and she looks tall and feels tall. There's just something really regal about her, no matter what she's doing. Dialogue that she has near the beginning, she says, "Great, sexy, gorgeous, cool ass guy," when she's talking about Ben Affleck. And the way she says it sort of feels like she's working it out with the dialect coach of how hard to hit the American accent. So there's a certain type of artifice to it that I think is really great and kind of funny here, but super intentional. And it's one of the best parts about her performance, because then she has to put on fake accents later when she's in the Ozarks, and it's a really bad accent, and she gets figured out pretty quickly as a result. I'm glad that Reese Witherspoon opted out of doing this. I don't think she has. I love her. I don't think she has quite the physical stature for this, or the right kind of iciness. I love her in, Freeway and Election. I don't think it would have served her very well here. Whereas Pike is absolutely perfect here. It is a really delicious performance from beginning to end. And even if you were to go in cold, she she has a seductive nature as a performer, and especially as Amy here, that is the type of femme fatale that you are always going to root for. It's the meme of like, girl does sociopathic shit, and the gays are like, go girl.
Honestly,
That
work.
is absolutely, honestly, all of it. That is what this is, like, all the time. And she just never flinches. She never flinches as a performer. So I adore her. I think she is fun, risky without being reckless, and I think it is just a juicy performance. I love her in this.
Yeah, I love this performance. I love this movie. People can listen to my full thoughts on an episode of For My Consideration, one of my Patreon bonus series. Had a great chat with Kenzie Fanunu about the film itself. We definitely talked about Rosamund's performance there, so I'll probably repeat myself a little there. But I think this is a pitch perfect performance. I had very little context knowledge of Rosamund's true talent before Gone Girl. I had certainly seen her in things, but it's just like what Fincher wanted, which is someone I didn't really have a strong relationship with, and being so aloof and enigmatic and kind of unpredictable in this great way that really suited this role. She is just wonderfully terrifying here, and it's one of those performances where you almost have to take a step back and like wonder about Rosamund herself to be able to get to such an intense like mental state. Like there is such a great almost alien quality to her in this role that I think some people can mistake for being cold and awkward, but I think all of that is exactly the point of the character of Amy. She is strange. She is off kilter. She can play the sort of happy wife well enough, but it's certainly not her in her natural state. And it's so fascinating to watch her, especially in the first half of the film. And I knew what the twist was going into it, even the first time, because I had read the book, devoured it, had a great time with it. And just seeing how strange and sort of off kilter she is, which is combined with the sort of new agey spa music of the score. She's so sharp and so calculating in her eyes, but there's also this kind of like droll, above it all tone of voice that she affects. I actually noticed on this watch that her voice is so oddly like old Hollywood sounding, where it feels weirdly dubbed because of how precise she is with her speech. She really just, I don't know, it's fascinating to watch in a modern context. And I feel like she gives this aura of like nothing going unnoticed, like always paying attention to everything around her, what Nick is saying about her to her, watching his reaction to everything she says as they first meet, for example. And it's just like oddly chilling, even though this is supposed to be the good times, right? Like we're meeting and we're having fun. They haven't driven each other to madness yet, and yet there's still something you can't quite put your finger on that's like, this feels slightly a few degrees off.
And I think that goes hand in hand with David Fincher and his style, because he is maybe the most precise filmmaker working right now. Mm-hmm. So I think he gets to meet his match with Pike here, because Amy as a character is so almost frustratingly precise.
Yeah.
It's kind of one of the great things. I mean, once we are into the section of the story where we know the setup of the fake death and her plan and her post-its and all of that, it becomes a really great match of actor and director. It would be impossible to not think of like what somebody like Nicole Kidman would do here, maybe 5-ish years earlier, not in 2014, because that would also be a very dream combination for me. I know obviously it almost happened with Panic Room. I don't know if Panic Room would have been the right Kidman vehicle for her and Fincher. I think this would have been.
Certainly.
Had this come out 10 years prior, it would have been Nicole Kidman, like completely.
Yeah.
And I think sort of to your point about what do I think of Pike after being able to play this, that is sort of the Kidman thing, where somebody becomes inextricably connected to a performance and a role that you blur the line yourself for who this person is. And then, Pike just had Saltburn last year, where she is also this posh, absolute horrible person. And you're like, where are we? Who is Rosamund Pike? Is this Rosamund Pike?
I care a lot.
And am I okay with it?
It's
yes. Oh, I love that. I love
and her Bob there. It's incredible.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, I mean, just to keep talking about the flashbacks, I just think it's so fun to watch that. There's, again, like that sort of blasé quality of feeling like she's always sort of doted on by everyone and kind of dazzling people with her mere presence and her wit and her good looks that she's just become so jaded. Like when she talks about how, her parents created this revisionist history of her life, like when she quit her musical instrument or whatever, then Amazing Amy in the book series became a prodigy. And it's like she's so self-aware at all times and so constantly analyzing perception versus reality in the way that she conducts herself around people, even Nick. And there is a cleverness to Nick too that she kind of likes in a way, but she only really likes it when he is on her level with her as equals. And I just think in her performance, she has this kind of like smug satisfaction when Nick is clever to her back, or like doing the treasure hunts and picking up on her clues. So even though she doesn't have a whole lot of the juicy stuff until the reveal, I do think she does lay the groundwork well for the kind of person that Amy is and the privilege of how she presents herself to the world. This sort of like too smart for her own good sort of attitude, and her awareness of the kind of person she is, like in that argument where they're having financial struggles and saying she doesn't want to be the nagging shrew or the controlling bitch or whatever, which is what Nick is making her be. And, it's just very detached and unemotional. Like it feels very calculating in her performance, which would normally feel artificial or wooden, or these things we say about performances we think are fake and artificial feeling. But I think it just suits the character so perfectly that she's kind of like this sociopath hiding in plain sight, even if people around her don't quite know it.
And it's what's kind of fun about the character and the book and the movie is that normally this type of extreme type A is always their own undoing.
Yeah.
Because they think that they are so meticulous that there's no thread left to be pulled for anyone to find out what she's doing. And that is actually the case here. She is basically the killer in the serial killer movie, watching the investigation unfold. She quite literally is doing that from that campsite. And there is that smug feeling of success in it, because she does almost always find herself as the smartest person in the room, or thinking that she is the smartest person in the room. And it's why her back and forth with Nick and with Ben Affleck is really so good, because he does match her for that. And she just hasn't really, and it's not specifically in a challenge way, because I think that would be too easy for her to deconstruct somebody that was trying to challenge her. She just really does want somebody that, like you said, is meeting her at her level. And it's one of my favorite things that Ben Affleck's done too.
It is genuinely my favorite thing he's ever done. Like it's incredible.
It's capitalizing, and this is a post Batman. So, right, I think, yeah. So I think, I don't remember, but it is sort of capitalizing on his stature,
totally,
as a star as well, and that works really, really well against Pike being not that. I think a massive star in that role maybe would have been distracting, because you would then be really focusing on that actress less than what they're doing. You would be deconstructing it in a way that was not going to be too beneficial in the watching, which is why now, me saying Nicole Kidman being in this would have been a great choice. But no, we'd be watching Nicole Kidman be Amy.
Yeah.
Done the whole time.
You would also be wondering, like, why she doesn't really have that much screen time in the beginning. Like, what's the deal? Like, why is this A-list actress in this role that doesn't seem to really suit her? And with this, you never think that. So,
yes.
Yeah. But then the switch happens, And we cut to her driving down the highway like it's a car ad, like sunglasses on, hair flowing, fully free, and her like voiceover monologue that is so perfect every time. Like I truly can't help but smile as she is just laying out the painstaking steps that she took to make her grand plan happen, including befriending a local idiot and prodding her with stories about Nick being abusive or faking the pregnancy because people are more invested in, pregnant women going missing, and her staging this whole crime scene. And I don't know, just Rosamund's whole line delivery, just starting with that, "I am so much happier now that I'm dead," technically missing. Just the sarcasm, the sardonic sort of wit that she has in that monologue. It's just very, that withering tone as she talks about cool girls and just her resentment of women who try to be what their boyfriend or their husband wants them to be, like watching Adam Sandler films, as she says, and eating pizza while being a size 2. And I don't know, I think there is a real like catharsis there that really crystallizes her worldview in a way, and how there is some validity in what she's saying, but it's also a little flawed and having a little bit of an internalized sexism almost with how much she belittles women and feeling like she herself, like she is playing into stereotypes, but at least she's aware of what she's doing. And she assumes that other women are not as clever as Miss Amy Dunn,
Absolutely. And that's part of her above it all of those voiceover deliveries. I mean, again, to just sort of use the word smug, but complimentary, not derogatory.
Yes.
She, to be clear, she is delivering those with just such a sense of self-satisfaction. It's so delicious. Sometimes it really feels like a very generational performance. And I know we're going to talk about some like Twitter questions and things later.
Yeah.
That I don't want to like spoil too much with how I feel about what I would compare this performance to. But there are definitely some femme fatale style and direct femme fatale performances that are so iconic that I think she sits right next to them in every regard. It is my absolute favorite kind of femme fatale character and performer.
Yeah. And really tapping into something very current and very now, even in that classic femme fatale archetype of what she's speaking to and how she is putting on airs in that way, in an age where people are often doing such things. Not breaking any news there, but, presenting themselves to the world in a way that may not be who they actually are behind closed doors. Just saying.
Yes.
I love seeing her from then on out because she is obviously much looser in her body language, and it feels like she doesn't have to present herself in this sort of girlish princess, like demure light. And there's like a real freedom there in like wearing these casual clothes, but still putting on a disguise, even though she feels much freer. And there is that smugness in how she's pulled this all off, and she's really proud of it. But then her having to be on her toes again because she's seemingly thought out everything, but then she's gone on to the Ozarks and this local woman befriends her, which she had not planned on, and it kind of throws her off her game, and she's a little shaky with that very affected New Orleans accent. But yeah, then this woman does some things that she doesn't like and she can't really predict, like when she says the Amy that they're watching on the TV seems uppity and that she's like a rich bitch and like there are consequences and all these things, and you see this real kind of like defensiveness from Amy, like almost like it's like when a writer is being given criticism, and like a writer gets like really defensive because it's like, what do you mean? I thought I crafted like this perfect story, and now here's this, local idiot poking holes in my story, right?
That's the great thing, is that she just utilizes the same befriend a local idiot that worked
right
before in North Carthage, except this idiot is a smart idiot.
Yeah.
And you are on her turf and territory, and she underestimates her so much. And that is the one thing that throws her off her game and that throws off her plan.
Yep.
Because they take all her money, and then she has to change it up. I love that. I love that, again, that sort of that arrogance, that what worked with Casey Wilson as the local idiot did not work here, because this woman and her friend, I think it's Boyd, isn't it Boyd Hazlitt? Yeah.
Something like that.
Are so scrappy and are so live day to day as very, very desperate people that she completely underestimates them while overestimating herself. And that's always the downfall of somebody like that.
Oh, yeah.
But it's not quite the downfall. It's really just an obstacle.
Right. A little roadblock. Yeah.
A little bit, just a little one.
But it is interesting also in that how Amy, I don't know if you picked up on it, but like Amy, when that's happening, the robbery, assumes that it was the man's idea when it was actually the woman's. And she talked him into it. Like Amy's like, did he talk you into this? And she's like, no, it was me. I talked him into it. So it speaks to, again, a little bit of that internalized sexism. I think that she would never think that this local woman would come up with this. And yeah, that once she is robbed, like the embarrassment is all over her face of feeling like, I can't believe I got so sloppy. I got outsmarted by these two locals. And just the rage of her screaming into her pillow is so great.
We love a scream into the pillow moment so much.
We really do. Yeah.
I love it.
But then she has to sort of enact plan B and goes to her old stalker, Desi Collins, Neil Patrick Harris.
I love this casting so much.
I know. So he can sort of help her hide at his beautiful lake house. And she really lays it on thick to sort of get back into his good graces. And you see her really appealing to his ego to like have him be my protector. But I love when we're watching like the TV interview that Nick has with the Celia Ward character, and she's just like, oh my God, drinking in every single detail of what he's saying, his body language, his face, just all his intentions. And she just has this little faint smile that sort of creeps onto her face as he's expressing this regret of, you know, him being a bad husband and not doing better and promising he'll be better, and giving these little hints and indications that he knows that she's out there and saying certain words, like with the woodshed, I'll take myself to the woodshed for you, and the chin tap thing. Yeah. It's like this beautiful game of like cat and mouse. And it's sort of like, okay, this is the mouse kind of like conceding to the cat in a way. And she's just reveling in it. I mean, like the whole sequence when she's at the lake house and she's pretending to be like bleeding and screaming in front of the surveillance cameras to, again, trap Desi here is so chilling. And her creating those injuries in her wrists and her vagina, it's just, and then seducing him and slitting his throat. I think it's so riveting just in her commitment and the focus in her eyes, the laser focus. And something I've never forgotten is when he's on top of her during sex and she gets ready for the kill and she grips the box cutter with both hands, and just the look in her eyes is frightening to me. It's just like, again, it's like, where did this come from, Rosamund Pike?
It's cut right out of like a Basic Instinct.
Yeah.
That moment in the best way possible.
Yeah.
Because again, you know, you are rooting for this woman to do really horrible things.
Yeah.
There is so much blood in that sequence. She's drenched in it. And she has the bob by this time. So you know she's serious.
Yes.
When Rosamund Pike gets a bob, you're all getting cut.
It's over. Quite literally, you might get cut. So watch out.
It's not gonna end well for you.
Yes.
No, I love that sequence. I love how much she is able to toy with him. I think she doesn't even need to go as far as she does. She doesn't even need to stroke his ego as much as she does, because he's already there. He already wants it so badly. But she also knows that men still want that ego stroking, and she gilds that lily to death.
Yeah.
I love it. She just mocks him by giving him that much need. It's gorgeous.
Mm-hmm. And then her triumphant return outside their house. We have this incredible sort of debriefing scene with the FBI and the medical examiners, where she's really putting on a performance of a lifetime about Desi being her kidnapper and her rapist, and she's tearing up and pretending to be like this shaken victim. And every time Kim Dickens like is poking holes in her story, she just kind of explains it away, or when she even doesn't have a good excuse, she leans into her being a victim and calling the police investigation incompetent, or says, "Oh, I'm feeling faint," or just like the drama she brings to that is so perfect, because she's still just playing the part of the helpless victim who's been through so much, and just those steely looks that she gives the Kim Dickens character for daring to question her and making her into the bad guy. It's just delicious. This is obviously the scene where you kind of are thinking of like Hannibal Lecter in terms of like people just sort of studying this mind and how they're able to get away with so much and pull the wool over so many people's eyes.
And she then has to recoup being the smartest woman in the room after being duped in the Ozarks. So she has to regain that control, and she does it with Kim Dickens when she is kind of having any of those confrontations or battles. Oh my God, though, that blood-soaked walk down the driveway is, again, just one of the it's an iconic moment that is so drilled in. And it's Pike's stature, it is her height, it is her arms to her side, it is the absolute drama of the entrance. It's not, I don't know, like crying and frail. It just has an almost regal quality to it.
Yeah,
because everybody's there, everyone's everyone's there, so she knows that this moment is the performance of her life, is that walk to the door.
right.
And it's perfect.
It is. And she also has so many great line readings in the end, as many people have quoted. One of my favorites, of course, is, "I've killed for you. Who else could say that? You think you'd be happy with a nice Midwestern girl? No way, baby. I'm it." Killer delivery. I'm sure you have many others that...
I do, but yeah, I mean, the end is great, but like I think about one from the beginning when she says, "Oh, native New Yorker, the world ends at the Hudson." I I love that. She just, there isn't anything that she doesn't really nail. He thinks Velveeta is cheese. I love that. It's she never passes up a chance to show where she feels in her life, in her position, and how people should see her, because she is curating this persona the whole time, as meticulously as that calendar of post-its, the whole time, even with her parents, all the way through. Her parents are like, "Nick killed our daughter and that's what we think happened." And she even gets, it becomes then too a slight revenge against them.
Oh yeah.
In her moment of return. I love that, because then they have, what do they have? They just look like absolute assholes. I love it. It's one of the best female characters like ever.
Yeah. Every time I watch it, I'm just gagged by her whole plan and how she just keeps coming up with plan B, plan C, and deploying that final thing at the end of saying that she's pregnant, in front of Missy Pyle. It's a masterstroke. It's truly like watching a genius at work. And you need someone who is as smart and as calculating as Rosamund Pike to pull that off.
Exactly. It is a marriage of role and performer, that it has to be that.
Yeah. As she would say, that's marriage. So on that note, I think it's time to move on to our final losing nominee. We spent quite a lot of time on Rosamund, but how can you not? Reese Witherspoon in Wild. So Reese Witherspoon gets her second Oscar nomination here, 9 years after her win for Walk the Line. And this was a very important turning point for Reese in her career because in between Walk the Line and Wild, she was in a bit of a fallow period because she started making a lot of movies for money. And she divorced Ryan Phillippe, and she was growing frustrated with the lack of good material out there for women her age. So her first movie after her Oscar win was Rendition, which was a flop. She did commercial fare like Four Christmases and Monsters vs. Aliens, which did well, but they weren't really passion projects for her. Then in the early 2010s, she was in a series of specifically love triangle movies, including How Do You Know, Water for Elephants, and This Means War, none of which were received well. So she really kind of took a step back and tried to get back on the right track. And she did a few grittier films like Mud and Devil's Knot. And she also founded her production company, which was then Pacific Standard in 2012. Eventually it would be folded into Hello Sunshine. But then that really kind of helped kickstart a very successful career as a producer and a businesswoman and creating a whole media empire in the years since. So like we said, she produced Gone Girl. Then she produced and agreed to star in Wild, which is an adaptation of the memoir by Cheryl Strayed, all about Cheryl's solo hiking trip across the Pacific Crest Trail in 1995, which was over 1,000 miles. And Reese stars as Cheryl as she hikes the trail, and we get flashbacks to what led her ultimately to decide to take this on, learning about her relationship with her mother, Bobby, a single mother played by Laura Dern, and how all of this just caused her to make this journey to get back in touch with herself again. So yes, let's talk Wild here. Thoughts on Reese overall and her big sort of career shift here that she makes with Wild.
I love Reese Witherspoon and have been in the camp for her from the beginning. Man on the Moon, Election Freeway. Those are like my top tier Reese Witherspoon. And, I like her rom-com-y stuff, the Sweet Home Alabamas. But that period you were talking about where she was trying to kind of recoup that and go back to that, and it was extremely unsuccessful. I feel like it was as an observer, glad it happened because it sort of gave her the permission to do other things, and instead of feeling like she had to recapture something that was gone and that people were not going to respond to her with. And I think like Julie Roberts was very similar, where the success in rom-com films was so high, and then venturing into darker material, audiences said no, they don't want it. And I always want a performer to be able to do whatever they want to do instead of feeling like they're chasing an audience or chasing their own past. So I love that she did this. I know she had to bypass other things potentially in order to do it, including Gone Girl. I think this was much closer and better to really kind of what she needed. And she had an Oscar by this time. I mean, I think a lot of times people think when somebody wins an Oscar that what happens after that is they are afforded every single possible opportunity and choice imaginable. And that just is not always the case. And so I think creating her own company so that she could do those things herself instead of waiting to be given them, fantastic, and absolutely what she should have done. Yeah. And then it brought us Wild, which I think is one of her very, very best performances. And it's funny that it came after like the 127 hours and Into the Wild of telling these stories of extreme adventurism as a form of tragedy. And hers is not. Strayed's story of this is not Christopher McCandless. It's not a story of tragedy. And I think that is one of the best things about it. But I don't know. I think what Reese Witherspoon does in Wild is tap into the grittiest parts of her from very, very early on in her career without really kind of losing focus of the charm of her rom-coms. Uh, because a part of this is how willingly or unwillingly she's able to charm men, and sometimes that works to her advantage. Sometimes it is a very scary moment that I imagine almost any woman knows or has gone through. And I think she strikes exactly the right balance of, I don't know who Cheryl Strayed in any way or what she is like, and I'm glad, because I only know Witherspoon's really version of her in that sense. So I mean, I was able to come to it in a way that I'm of discovery. And again, like a lot of female characters that we love and that are certainly talked about on this show, she just has the qualities of strength and vulnerability in equal amounts that make for somebody extremely compelling. And so then when you can add it to somebody like Witherspoon, who is probably feeling the most comfortable with the character that she has in a really, really long time, then it's again one of those perfect marriages.
Yeah.
Of role and performer. I love her in this.
Great. Yeah, I agree. I think this is a really, really strong performance, and I'm very happy for Reese that she was able to step into this new phase and do so very successfully. Like, she could have easily just, slummed it in shitty rom-coms or, sentimental dramas for the rest of her career, but she really wanted to challenge herself and she wanted to evolve, and she has really cornered the market, I think, on films and shows and just media overall, like books too, of primarily for women of a certain age. And I think Wild is a really, really good example of that. I mean, like, if you look at the very first scene, which is her midway through her journey on the trail, ripping her toenail off, which is so graphic, but that really braces you for the reality of this situation that she's in and how it's not going to be some like glamorous eat, pray, love type of journey here to self-discovery. It's raw and ugly and full of self-doubt, but she commits to the anger there and the rawness of this woman who has just convinced herself that this is what she needs to do no matter what. But it is very taxing. It's very, very hard, and especially when she is making a sort of careless mistake like that of her boot falling off this huge slope. The rage that she shows there is something I love whenever she taps into that, because it's so different from like that America's sweetheart type of image that she had sort of cultivated in the early 2000s. But that drive and that ambition and that like inner anger and rage, that like type A type of thing that is so in her, I love when she explores that. And this is such a great character to sort of channel a lot of that energy.
That shoe throwing moment is one of my favorites. It's one of the first things I wrote down, because she just screams, "Fuck you, bitch!" And it just it was such a freeway moment. It's such a like when she gets in real life, when she was arrested for the DUI. It just, speaking of great iconic moments, it's
True.
one of the greatest of all time.
Do you know who I am?
You know who I am. You're gonna. I use that all the time when it's absolutely inappropriate and totally unnecessary, but I have to because it's the best. Yes. But that's where she's at in that moment, is that, and you can feel it. It is absolutely electric, because that is my favorite era of Reese Witherspoon, is that deep South, unhinged, just firecracker. And she has it in that moment. And it's one of my favorite moments of the whole film.
Yeah. But of course she does, it's not just that. It's what's fascinating is that it is a looking back, because I haven't seen this either since 2014, a surprisingly restrained and subtle performance than she had really gotten the chance to do in quite some time, I think.
I mean, just the physical nature of it sort of keeps her at this level where it would be really difficult to
Yeah.
overact. It wouldn't make a whole lot of sense. But even in the sequences that are not about the hike, the flashbacks with Laura Dern or the ex-husband, the heroin and random sex, and the way that they're cut and inserted is so abrupt and abrasive, but in like just the right way. And it's almost strange because I want to say it feels like it's directed by a woman.
Hmm.
I think there are many male directors, gay and not gay, that understand how to make a film with a female lead. I think Jean-Marc Vallée really, really
Oh, yeah.
got it. And there are so many elements of this that are, oh, this is what Big Little Lies ended up being. The songs that he chooses,
Mm-hmm.
sure, Big Little Lies. So you can see the
Yeah.
the
And the whole
footprint there.
editing style
And
is,
the editing style.
yeah.
It's exactly like
Where was
that.
that nomination, by the way?
Yeah, but
Right?
that's a whole yes,
Yeah.
exactly. But yeah, I think he gets it. He just gets it in a way
Yeah.
that, many straight male directors don't. Their purview and their perspective is just never going to really uh free themselves
Right.
from being able to let a female led movie and character tell the story.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
agree. Yeah.
Yeah.
And even just storytelling wise, watching her sort of interactions with strangers, especially men, that part feels very female driven, of how she is very distrusting no matter who she comes across at first, which is certainly, I think, rooted in reality for being a woman on her own, coming across strange men who could be dangerous. And she's already on edge and sort of, quiet and sort of keeping to herself a lot, which I do, again, find compelling compared to her typical sort of bubbly, charming self. But it's like there is that sense, I think, of feeling like she screwed up a lot in her life with her ex-husband and her cheating and her drug abuse and her getting pregnant by accident. And she is just like living with those regrets at the top of her mind, really, which I think is, again, illustrated really beautifully in the intercutting of the past and the present. And it's not like she's unfriendly, but it does take her a bit to open up. And I think she communicates a lot of that with her eyes in showing a little bit of that stubbornness and her wanting to do this on her own, but also having to rely on strangers a little bit at times, but then ultimately grateful for their help. Like a lot of that is very unsaid for the most part, but she still just naturally gives you that nuance, I think.
Yeah, I love how cautious she is with W. Earl Brown
Mm-hmm.
in that truck
Right.
because she's projecting sort of what he looks like and what that might mean.
Yeah.
He's the nicest guy in the world and super nice wife, all of that. But she is there's that. There is just the fear of being a woman in a truck with a man. There's obviously the two hunters where there is a very real sense of danger from the one. And then just the way that she navigates both the character and Witherspoon navigates the ranger that really just kind of wants to fuck her
Mm-hmm.
and the three young guys that are sort of like idolize her.
Yeah.
That entire sequence with both of them, also one of my absolute favorites in the film because she is navigating the ranger guy and his expectations and what he wants from her and the potential danger of it too. Had those three younger guys not come along, and they're enamored by her and have, the nicknames for her, and their youth and their just sort of just male obliviousness doesn't understand they don't understand that her existence on the trail is danger for her, that all these moments you just get everything handed to you. Is They say it in a way that isn't meant like mean, but because they're envious of her being a female, being able to get, that cup of coffee from the ranger, and nobody ever gives us anything.
Yeah.
And she understands the fallacy of that statement, obviously. And it just goes to Witherspoon's really beautiful subtlety in most of this movie when, like you said, it could have really just constantly kind of gone big.
Yeah.
And she doesn't. She lets her face do so much storytelling, and definitely in that moment. And it's one of my favorite moments in all of it.
Yeah. The whole scene of the two creepy guys and then one of them making the pass at her and she just freezes up, and just her navigating the tension of that, of being so visibly uncomfortable, but trying to let him down easy so he doesn't retaliate or anything. It's a pretty short scene, but again, it's like those interactions with men that are just so fascinating and do feel very rooted in a female perspective. And I also do love the moment, even though it's a little cheesy maybe later on, of when she comes across this grandmother with her grandson and their llama and they have this sort of brief chat about life, and the boy is like asking about her parents, and she talks about how her mother died, and she sort of starts to quietly open up about how she died because she got really sick. And then he starts singing this little song to her, and it just touches something very primal in her almost, and she just goes alone and just weeps in the woods after they leave and says she misses her mother. And it's another, like, for the most part, quiet moment until that release, but it really, really packs a punch, I think.
Absolutely. Yeah, and then I think about when she does hit that one section of the trail where she meets up with a guy that she sees naked, and
Yes.
like, let's meet up at this place. And she gets the help from the one guy, like, I'm gonna take, help you take everything out of your backpack that you don't need, and your shoes are the wrong size, that's why your feet hurt. I love that. It's really it's really smart in presenting the full spectrum of men that she encounters on this, that are helpful without agenda, those that are helpful with it. Those are, I mean, it's the quadrant. It's like chaotic evil and chaotic good, and it's
Yeah.
all of the things. So in this one hike, in this one experience, is sort of it is the lifetime of a woman
Mm-hmm.
in her interactions with men throughout a lifetime. It's and again, Reese Witherspoon at every moment is managing it with it just really perfect subtlety.
Yeah, I think so too. And if I were to slightly be negative, I do think the flashback scenes aren't as effective to me as the present day hiking scenes. Some of that feels a little like she is trying to play younger than she is. And especially some of the scenes with Laura Dern, it's like these two kind of feel like sisters more than mother and daughter, but okay. Like, especially now with the context of like Big Little Lies and them becoming like these best friends over time, watching them as quote unquote mother and daughter, not always the most believable, but regardless, I
It's
do
a
think,
it's a
yeah,
it's a suspension of disbelief, to
yeah,
be sure. I
hmm
mean, especially when they pass each other in the hall, and
yeah,
poor Reese just has this shake and go wig to make her
right,
look 16. I was just, I'm like,
mm,
I'm gonna go with it
yeah,
because I have to meet the movie where it is.
right,
It's not coming to me. Um, and yeah, I mean, I think some of those maybe are less effective because they are these jarring, jutting flashbacks, so that you get the drug use and you get the
Yeah.
sex, to shade in things.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it needed a little bit more, but then I just wouldn't want to labor on
Right.
those too much. But I mean, other movies do that more successfully. Some do it far less successfully. So I would kind of probably put it in the middle for that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but yeah, I don't even know if we were gonna talk much about Laura Dern, but it's an interesting thing.
I really like the performance, honestly. I think
Yeah,
she's
I
really
don't.
warm and empathetic, and just in her 8 or 10 minutes of screen time she has, really fills in a lot with that character personally.
I think she's great. I
Yeah.
think she's pretty wonderful.
Yeah.
The the scene where Reese goes to the hospital after she's died and they tell her that she's donated her eyes is quite a lot.
Yeah.
Uh, it's it's a lot of drama.
It
It's
is.
brief, thankfully, but
Mm-hmm.
I think it's the one section that kind of lets her have her like big screamy,
Mm-hmm.
emotionally melty moment, but it's not indulgent,
Yeah. And
thankfully.
it did end up being her Oscar scene
Yeah, of
in
course
the
it
end.
did. I mean, that's
You know.
yeah, of course it did.
Yeah. But not personally my favorite aspect of
No,
her performance. But
not
overall,
quite.
yeah, I think it's a really, really great performance. And again, just so happy that this helped her turn a corner in her career and take some agency. So it was a self actualizing moment for Reese and for Cheryl. So perfect
Exactly.
marriage. That's the theme of
There you
this
go.
episode. Shall we move on to our winner?
All right.
I know you have a lot to say. All right. Julianne Moore in Still Alice. Whew. All right. Julianne Moore winning her Oscar on her 5th nomination, following a path that a few actresses have done in the past, like Susan Hayward and Shirley MacLaine and Susan Sarandon, where they were all in the bridesmaid position for their first 4 nominations, and they finally won on their 5th, and oddly enough, have never been nominated again after their win. And that is sadly still the case with Julianne Moore, but still plenty of time. Either way, we last talked about her with her banner year in 2002, where she was nominated for both Far From Heaven and The Hours, and she had come close a few times getting other nominations for things like The Kids Are All Right, A Single Man. She continued to work with Todd Haynes with an appearance in I'm Not There. She played Sarah Palin in the HBO movie Game Change and won an Emmy and pretty much all the other awards for that in 2012. She also had a recurring role on 30 Rock, relevant because she helped cast Alec Baldwin in Still Alice here. But, joined the Hunger Games franchise in 2014. So she was constantly working in both prestige fare and box office plays. And yeah, 2014 was another really strong year for her where she had that Hunger Games movie. She was in Nonstop. She was one of the stars of Maps to the Stars, which she also got a lot of buzz for. And I mean, she was in a horror movie called Seventh Son, like just a really diverse year for Julianne, good and bad. Either way, she was everywhere. And Still Alice is an adaptation of the novel of the same name about a woman in her 50s who develops early onset Alzheimer's disease. Julianne was the first choice for the directors, Richard Gleitzer and Wash Westmoreland, and she diligently prepared for the role by meeting with other women with the disease. She did a lot of prep work for it. So Julianne plays Alice Howland, a linguistics professor at Columbia University who's just turned 50, and she suddenly starts to lose her memory and forgetting her words and getting lost during her run. So she goes to a neurologist who eventually diagnoses her with early onset Alzheimer's. So she and her husband, played by Alec Baldwin, and her 3 kids, played by Kristen Stewart, Kate Bosworth, and Hunter Parrish, grapple with this as Alice steadily loses more and more of her memory. So let's talk Julianne Moore and her big win here. Thoughts overall on Julianne, of which I'm sure you have many, and her Oscar-winning performance.
I love Julianne Moore, probably my favorite actress.
Hmm.
I she is a ride or die, and even when she does terrible things like that Seventh Son movie,
Hmm.
um, I, she makes a lot of really bad choices. Or, and
Yeah.
I forgive her for it in a way that I don't a lot of people,
Hmm.
because she's also given some of my favorite of all time.
I'm very familiar with that sentiment. I'll just say that.
Yeah, you have to love the ones you love for the good and the bad.
Yep,
You just
you
that
do.
is our job.
Hmm.
Um, so her being a multi-nominated actress and being an awards obsessive, I wanted this for her for a really long time. And her being up against Nicole Kidman, my other fave, was like my Sophie's choice there. Obviously, I would have preferred more to win for Far From Heaven, and Kidman somewhere else at
Yeah.
some other time. So this was just one of those like waits. It was an is this kind of ever going to happen? Is it not? And is that okay? Am I okay with it as a as a fan?
Hmm.
Um, and then this came along, and I have a lot, maybe too much to say, so I'll try and break it down a little bit.
Okay.
This movie basically made Awards Watch. I would not have had the trajectory that I had without this movie,
Hmm.
and I'll explain why. So it premiered at Toronto in 2014. I started Awards Watch in 2013, like right at like September at award season. So just sort of building what that was. And I was not at Toronto that year, 2014, and the movie premiered but had no distributor at the time. I had a very small following and wasn't even like my name at that time. I wasn't using my name. I was only using Awards Watch and trying to like create branding and all of that. And so I was on Twitter with my meager follower account, like constantly adding Sony Pictures Classics to buy this. I'm like, you need to buy this. You need to buy this and you release this, because I've just had this sort of sense of whatever arrogance and whatever. But I was also like, this is, I don't want to call it a weak year, because I know it gets called a weak year as to why she won, but it was an open year. We'll say
Hmm.
that.
Yeah.
There was an open year of possibility. And they bought it and decided to fast track this campaign. And so I did a literally a one paragraph article on some of the responses that the movie got at Toronto, where I said, it's a harrowing tale and filled with outstanding performances that were raved at its TIFF debut. Almost immediately after that, that quote, which I had not seen the film, was in the trailer and in the official FYC ad, which I still have from the Hollywood Reporter here, and catapulted my visibility in a way that I was not expecting. And it sort of then, after that, became a bit of a running joke with my circle of awards friends and all that, that I had a quote for something I did not see. And it was really funny.
Yeah.
I I loved it.
Wow.
It's so I when I think about this movie, when I think about this performance and this win, I think about that I, in a weird alt universe, maybe kind of way, would not exist without it. So
Wow.
I kind of owe Julianne Moore and Sony Classics and Still Alice my rise for better or worse at the
That's
time.
that's incredible. I
Yeah,
never knew that actually. So was there like a reason that you were aggressively pushing like Sony Picture Classics specifically? You have to get it.
because they even at the time, they had such a great reputation
Yeah,
for
that's what I
Best
figured.
Actress,
Yeah.
and I felt like it was the right that was the right studio for them, and that they would be able to, for the film, and they would be able to do it,
Yeah.
uh, and they did. It was I just felt it was exactly
Yeah.
the right place
It
for
was.
this movie,
Hmm.
and then it
You should do
was.
the same thing for the summer book. Just throwing that out there.
You know, I would. I saw that at AFI.
I know. I saw.
I loved it. She is amazing.
Hmm.
I would love for that to happen. It
Work your
would be great.
magic.
Yeah, because I mean, I know we're
Yep.
sidetracking a little bit, but when Sony did that with The Wife and then decided to hold it for the full year, I don't know. You
Yep.
got to strike when the iron's hot.
I know.
But uh yeah, so that's my connection and story to this movie and to
Wow.
Julianne Moore. I did meet her after, yeah, after Far From Heaven, and had a nice little conversation that I thought she should win. It was, I would never say something like that now. I have much more decorum with actors than I did
Yeah.
back then of being able to say something like that. Um, she was very, very nice about it. But yeah,
So I take it you liked the performance once you did see it.
it's terrible.
All of this to
Um,
say she sucks. I hate
after
Still
all,
Alice.
um, I love this performance. I love the movie. I saw it. I just rewatched it yesterday from this recording, and I still cry at her speech at the Alzheimer's. Oh,
Yeah.
it's when I saw this and when I wrote the review of it, my stepfather had early onset Alzheimer's, which we had just discovered the year before, and it was an enormous undertaking
Hmm.
for my mother-in-law, who was not really prepared for it. She's a very narcissistic person, and it was a lot for her to be able to give up herself
Yeah.
too much. So I spent a great deal of time with him, and we would go on walks like 3 or 4 times a week for 2 hours a day to alleviate some of that pressure from her. And it's such an infectious and horrible disease, and the decline was so rapid. Uh, so when I came to this, you don't always have a personal connection to something, and sometimes I know that I'll watch something or I'll even review it, and I know that I can blur that line of how I feel about what I'm seeing and what I'm going through or have gone through. But I almost feel like because of that, it has to hit a higher mark than maybe something else would.
Yeah. Makes sense.
And certainly a lot of people treated this movie as a disease of the week kind of lifetime
Lifetime.
movie,
Yeah. Hmm.
which again is such an incredibly misogynistic attachment to stories like this, because it's only women's stories that are ever given that moniker.
Yep.
Um, you wouldn't say that about The Theory of Everything.
I would.
I mean, good, good, then, good.
I think we should start doing that. But
I
anyway.
think I okay. See, I love that
Yeah.
idea.
Yeah.
So I I went into Still Alice with obviously a lot of hope that it would be good for the sake of Julianne Moore, for the sake of her Oscar future,
Hmm.
and for the sake of just kind of being able to see something that I was thinking about and feeling. And it's not the first Alzheimer's movie that was ever made, but I do think that I think it understands some of the intricacies of it. It's not it's not pushing any boundaries. The kids are very crudely drawn to be, the mean one and the one who doesn't know anything and is barely on screen, and the one that has the connection. It's,
Yeah.
there's it's a lot of shorthand when
Mhm.
it comes to the family stuff. Um, so that kind of just allowed me to focus on more, because she comes in to this with a lot of very trademark qualities. Her laughs and her cries are uh, a huge part of her cinematic persona.
Yep.
And kind of like Reese Witherspoon in Wild, she has a sense of that. She knows that, I think, in this, and does not overplay her hand uh, in a way that I think could have been pretty easy to get that, big Julianne Moore turn down mouth cry and laugh, which are basically the same thing.
Yes.
I mean, she has one big one,
Yeah.
uh, but it's just a much more nuanced performance than I was expecting. Because
Mhm.
not that I wasn't expecting something good from her, but just because a disease of the week movie lives inside of a very narrow construct, and it has certainly, like I said, the fallacies of them, the underdrawn kids, but it's more that takes it from that and really finds something almost as naturalistic as Cotillard in 2 days. There's I do feel like she is really above everything that's in this. It also has, its little plinky score that's so delicate and so gentle, that it's massaging the audience, just being very, very thoughtful. But I love more in this. It's a really beautifully sad performance.
Mhm.
Um, yeah,
Yeah.
not a lot. Sorry.
I don't know how I'm gonna top that, but what if I'm just like, yeah, she's good. Yeah, good performance.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, y'all. No, I think this is a really, really good performance. I don't really know why it gets criticized so much as just like an easy career win. Do I think it's her best performance? Maybe not. Is it even her best nomination? Maybe not. But I don't think this is just an overdue career win where she's just good enough, but not actually worthy. And it's just like an acknowledgement of her very strong career, and that's it. I do think she is really, really good, and she has clearly done a lot of homework on how to accurately portray this disease, specifically at this age, too, compared to when most people who develop Alzheimer's act. And I mean, she's such a emotive actress, I find, that it is very easy to just empathize with her. And that's true in a lot of her filmography, but definitely here, where there's just this great tension between her kind of feeling ashamed and trying to cover up some of her missteps as she's speaking and pretending things are okay and that even her disease hasn't progressed, alongside the reality of her just getting worse and worse. And then, really tragically, getting to the point where she doesn't even have that separation between those frustrations and what's happening to her. It's all just happening to her. And she's not even conscious of trying to cover things up. She is just fully inside of herself by the end. And I think she really, like, I don't know how much this was filmed in sequence, but I think she really tracks that journey very naturally, that complete descent into herself.
And it's, there is similar to Eddie Redmayne in theory. You have She is a character who is a professor of
Right.
linguistics, so words and etymology and phonetics and everything are her everything.
Yeah.
It's also like a really neat time capsule of the time, because Words with Friends factors so heavily
I know.
into this story.
Well, don't tell
Um,
my mom that because she still plays. But yes.
I play on like the a plane when I just want to play against like the
Yeah.
computer. Um, but I mean, it's it's I think I think that's the angle that a story like this or theory takes, where you take the great tragic irony of it
Yeah.
to kind of emphasize it. Um, if she was not a professor of linguistics, would it have the same metaphorical impact? No. uh it's it's kind of ingrained in the
Yeah.
story, that's a part of it. I mean, books and plays are a really big part of this story. Kristen Stewart is a struggling actress, and there, oh, I think about the perestroika um reading at the end, just
I know.
fucking extraordinary.
Rip your heart out. Yeah.
Oh my god, I mean, mm,
Yeah.
I wanted this to be the last of the rewatches so that it
Yeah.
would quite literally stick with me,
Hmm.
the most recent. And yeah, it was, I don't know, maybe even more impactful
Hmm.
now, both the film and her performance, because 10 years is a really long time. A
Yeah.
lot can happen to you in 10 years of how you view things. I view your worldview is
Hmm.
different in 10 years. And I still think that she just has such a mastery of Alice.
I agree. Yeah. And in so many sequences, I love how you see that dichotomy, like I was saying before, of like when she's going out for her run and it's scary because she doesn't know where she's going after a certain point, and then when she gets home talking to her husband and she's kind of trying to play it off like, oh, I'm just exhausted or something like that. But it's just like one of those incidents, obviously, that sticks with you when that type of thing happens. So when she does see the neurologist, it's just heartbreaking to see her just trying to sort of grapple with all of this and then trying to soldier on like things are fine at Christmas after that, and
Yeah.
forgetting how to make a recipe, and forgetting that she already met her son's new girlfriend. And I think she really actually nails how casual that can be. Like, she doesn't really emphasize those little lapses in her memory like another actor might, in a very obvious way of really, or, and I think also the direction really treats that in a sensitive way without it being like, oh no, she's just lost her memory of, this one thing. It's just very like casual in a way that like you almost, it can slip right by in a way, which I actually think is really accurate.
It definitely is. I mean, she has the moment where she loses her phone,
Yeah.
is scrambling for it in the middle of the night. Also very accurate.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think the story understands too is how inconsistent the memory loss and loss of time is, because it's like, how can you remember who your husband is every time but you don't remember who your daughter is once? I'm like, that's
Mm.
exactly what it's like, because somebody can have a kernel of 40 years ago that isn't lost, but 30 minutes ago is an absolute blur. And I do
Mm-hmm.
think it really understands that. One of the things it understands the most with the kids is the representation of Kate Bosworth constantly correcting her,
Yeah.
uh, versus Stewart, who will go along with whatever and just kind of ask questions.
Yeah.
And that was something that we learned as a family, called the sympathetic lie,
Mm-hmm.
where you
Oh
didn't
yeah.
question or correct them because it wasn't going to benefit them. If anything, it would often make them really angry
Mm-hmm.
through frustration or just combative. So you would kind of go along with the thing that they were believing, or at least ask a question that was not intrusive or accusatory. And that's something I think it understood really, really well. And again,
Yeah.
something that Moore just plays really beautifully. That moment where she's talking to Kristen Stewart after her play, like she is a stranger. When are we going to see you in other shows this summer? It's just, it's like, that's your daughter, Lydia. She goes, I know.
Yep.
And that is the weaving in and out of that. I don't know. That's just really beautifully handled. And it's Moore that is in charge of that.
And I just love that relationship between her and Kristen Stewart because she is really the only one who treats her mother with true compassion and not treating her with kid gloves in a way, ironically. And
Mm-hmm.
how the other kids just act just weirder around her and not knowing what to do. And Lydia is just like so in touch with what's happening. And that's why it is so upsetting when she does not recognize her at the play. And it's that great spaced out sort of quality that she's such a natural at here without it feeling overly pronounced. And then again, trying to cover it up, like you said, of course, I know it's her. Like, that's something I absolutely went through with my grandfather. And it's just a really tough situation emotionally to be on the other end of that. And I can't even really imagine what it's like to actually go through it as someone actually struggling with that and sort of trying to like smooth things over, because that's definitely something my grandfather did, of being like, yeah, of course, I know that. But it's like not entirely convincing that he actually did. And that's kind of similar to what she does here in a
And
very nuanced way. Yeah.
it is, and it's very twofold because it is a little bit of self-preservation, but it's also to protect the people that around you, that
Yeah.
to not make that situation more awkward or harder to manage or understand, and having the wherewithal to be able to kind of play both sides of that
Mm-hmm.
as a person. As Alice will say, she's not suffering with Alzheimer's, she's struggling with it. I
Mm-hmm.
love that. I love language. Words and language are incredibly important with
Yeah.
how we describe things and each other and ourselves. And I love that moment. It's why that scene, oh, it's why it's my favorite scene in the movie. It's just,
Yeah.
it understands. It really, really understands.
Yeah. That scene at the Alzheimer's Association event and working with the highlighter to make sure she doesn't repeat any words. You know, some of it could be presented in a bit of a cheesy way with the music swelling and the cinematography isn't super inspired necessarily, but just in her performance, that is a moment where she is so steady and then her voice cracks towards the end as she talks about her older self, or, yeah, you know, her old self, I mean, who loved studying communication. And it's such a powerful moment, just that connecting to that earlier version of herself to who she is now, and how that part of her isn't gone, that she's still in there somewhere. It's just harder for her to make those connections now. But that's still her. That is literally still Alice.
It is
So,
still Alice. Yes.
yeah.
It's
Yeah.
just harder to access.
Mm-hmm.
Just like it's the butterfly file on the computer.
Yeah.
That, and even how she gets to that really by accident.
Mm-hmm.
And that is a sequence, again, similar but very different than
Yeah.
2 days, one night, where that multi-pill uh suicide attempt is very frank and
Mm-hmm.
without any buildup whatsoever. But in this, it's it is a foreshadowed
Yeah.
occurrence. She has
Chekhov's
to,
gun type thing. Yeah.
very much, she makes the video for herself once she is in the far advanced stages of how to commit suicide and how to do it quietly and without telling anybody. And it's such a it is so the opposite of of 2 days, because she has to watch that video multiple times. She goes upstairs, downstairs. She forgets, by the time she gets upstairs, she forgets what she's there for. She
Mm-hmm.
goes back down, brings the laptop up, and she is thwarted by the housekeeper, who is not there or not supposed to be there, and then drops all the pills, and in that moment forgets what she's doing
Yeah.
and why she's even there. And it is a very different presentation of a similar situation, but again, you meet the movie for where it's at. How
Hmm.
it's done in 2 days is exactly how it should be done there. How it's done here is how it should be here, because it's explaining a much larger story than just a suicide.
Yeah, it's a really tough scene to watch her go through that just over and over and going back and forth. And it's just, you want someone, anyone, to just reach out and help her in that moment, which is why it is nice at the end that obviously we have Kristen Stewart sort of coming to the rescue ultimately and being the only person who's willing to actually help her mother through this in the end. And like you mentioned, having that beautiful Angels in America reading from Kristen Stewart in the end. I feel like this is actually kind of where I started to really take more notice of Kristen Stewart as an actress more so than a movie star actress. So this is sort of her on her path to that. So just wanted to note that. But yeah, and Julianne Moore's final, just again, she's so spaced out in this moment, but her connecting in this way and saying that it's about love. That's all she says. It's a really, really sweet, lovely, graceful moment that she nails.
It is, and it's a really hard balance to strike, I think, for a story like this of how you're going to end it and
Yeah.
how you want the end of your character to be. Um, I mean, you want it to be in a story like this with some grace and dignity, and I think that's what they give her. It would be probably a really big mistake to kind of pull the rug out from under us and make it more dramatically tragic, because it already is tragic. It already is. You don't need to do more than you need to do. So I I really like that ending,
Mm.
because it is kind of is it's as much as I could take. I
Yeah.
think really.
Fair. Yeah. Well, I think on that note, we should get into why Julianne Moore was our Oscar winner from this group. So, for the precursors, Julianne Moore did pretty well, even before the major precursors, winning National Board of Review, Chicago Independent Spirit Award, Washington, D.C. Pretty stronger showing than I remembered it being, actually. Marion Cotillard won the New York Film Critics, the National Society of Film Critics, Boston. Many of those wins tied 2 days, one night, and The Immigrant together. Rosamund Pike won the online film critics. St. Louis and other regional critics. Reese Witherspoon won Dallas, Fort Worth. Shout out Dallas, Fort Worth. Felicity Jones, I didn't see anything that she won.
She didn't win anything. The only thing that she had was the Santa Barbara, like the fake awards that Santa Barbara and Palm Springs. Oops, did I say that? Uh,
Yeah,
that are different. We'll just say they are different kinds
different,
of things.
sure.
But she did not win anything outside of that.
Yeah. So then with the major precursors, this was one of those years where everyone was pretty much in lockstep. So Julianne Moore, Felicity Jones, Rosamund Pike, Reese Witherspoon, all nominated at Critics' Choice, Golden Globe, SAG, BAFTA. Julianne won everywhere. So the only real suspense was who's getting that fifth slot. And Marion Cotillard, I believe, was only nominated at Critics' Choice,
That's it.
but she still made it in at the Oscars. So look at you go. So why do we think Julianne Moore swept in the way that she did and won this Oscar?
It it was the open year element of it. It was what we were talking about earlier. Only one of these performances came from a Best Picture nominee, uh,
Mm-hmm.
Felicity Jones, but it was not ever going to be a tandem win for her and Redmayne. It was his show all the way, but really, there was just no real challenger, and I think because three of these were sole nominees, and even Reese Witherspoon pulling in Laura Dern the way she did was like the nomination was the reward, and that was is what it was. So I think it gave voters a freedom to vote for more for the performance, but as just a collective win. Just as much as Marion Cotillard's nomination was just as much about her getting in everywhere for Rust and Bone and then missing at the last minute, that brought the attention to her being able to get this nomination.
Yeah.
So I think I think it's a convergence of everything, of an incredibly respected actor, of a well-respected performance. Because if it had only been the the four major precursors and nothing else leading up to that, you can side eye that a little bit more. And that kind of thing has happened, and that, where critics have one word and then industry starts and it completely turns the page. And that wasn't quite that here, because Moore and Pike had a really good balance of what each of them won. So it's she won based on merit, based on opportunity, and based on who she was.
Yeah. I think from even what I remember, she was pretty much almost locked since the film premiered at Toronto in September.
Mm-hmm.
And that's even from what I read again this past week from pundits and people writing about it. Like it just
Yep.
was happening, and then there was no stopping her. And it's just such a juicy role that gives her so much to do. And, even by this point, she had probably worked with everyone in the industry. And there were those rumblings about her as one of the best actresses to never win an Oscar to that point. Plus, she had a really good year commercially and critically. It all just sort of came together. But yeah, I do think she was greatly helped by this being perceived by some would say open, some would say weak year in this category. That's something I also came across looking back on the columnists writing about this race.
Oh
And
yeah.
yeah, I think it was just one of those things where voters didn't really think too hard about this category, which sucks to say. And I also think they probably felt the same way in supporting actor and supporting actress this year, which were also total sweeps for J.K. Simmons and Patricia Arquette. But it was just like Julianne seizing the momentum, the performance to back it up. The film is very accessible, very directly emotional. And if not for Julianne, it's like, I think there are others who could have maybe seized a bit of a narrative, like Reese sort of entering this new phase, or Rosamund as like this populist choice in a way. Felicity Jones, maybe his and hers Oscar in the film that they like the best. Marion is the wild card who sort of has a pocket of passion, but none of those emerged really as the clear alternative in the end. So it was just smooth sailing.
Yep.
That's it. There's nothing else to add, I don't think.
That's it.
We will talk about who we think was the runner-up later on, because it's kind of a mystery, I think, for especially in this decade, one of the harder choices perhaps to make.
Agreed.
So let's get to some of these questions, shall we?
Okay.
All right. Well, Trojan Sailor said, did anyone else start to notice their memory slip in the weeks after watching Still Alice, or was it just me?
Who is this? Wait, where am I?
Oh, no.
What?
Erik, you're on the podcast, and the runner-up is.
Oh,
You're answering a question.
yes. Well, my nickname isn't still Erik for a reason. Yeah. You definitely start questioning anything that you miss and words that you forget, for sure.
Yeah, definitely made me more conscious, even though I was like, 23 or something when I first saw Still Alice, or 24. And especially so watching it again 10 years later. So, yeah. Richard Thompson said, is it possible to win an Oscar years after your first nomination and have it not be considered a career award, regardless of skill and merit?
I mean, we kind of really just did that in answering why Moore won, because timing and competition can and is often a component. Sometimes it can be an overwhelming component. I don't know. there's always a Geraldine Page, but
Yes.
then there's always a Deborah Kerr as well. So
Yeah, it is a fair point. I think once someone gets into their 40s, I think especially people start to talk about it as, okay, this is a career award, which I think is definitely unfair, personally.
and we can't forget that Moore's win here was only the second time a woman in her 50s won Best Actress.
Mm-hmm.
And the first was Shirley Booth.
Wow. All ties together.
Symmetry.
Yes. You just love those actresses in their 50s.
I mean, bread and butter.
Yeah. Joey Gentili said, Moore was a straight up career win. Why do these happen still? Can we not ever get to a point of performance and not politics?
Next question. I'm not playing this game with Joey. It happens all the time. People think that they have career wins, or we think they're going to get them, and they don't. We have plenty of performers,
yes,
with 5, 6, 7, 8 nominations who never won. Deal with it.
Yeah. The thing is, we don't live in a vacuum. That's just the reality of it, especially when it comes to the industry where people have actually worked with the nominees. So I just don't really know what to say to that ultimately. It's always going to come into play in one way or another.
Mm-hmm. And if your taste is really bad, you're going to say things like that and have really bad opinions. So
okay, there we go.
Yeah.
Well, Fritz said, how happy are you in general with a career win for Julianne? Was it even a career win, or would she have won without the overdue narrative as well?
I feel like we're almost going to be repeating ourselves. So, I mean, if Fritz is asking, would Moore win without the previous 4 nominations? Like, this is her first nomination?
Or if she had won before, I guess, even?
I think there's another question that's asking that.
Yeah, that's true.
Let's posit that she had not been nominated before, but she was still Julianne Moore in this world. Would she have won on this nomination? Yeah, I think she would have won.
Me too. Also, just in general, there are worse wins to get upset about than Julianne Moore having an Oscar for a good performance.
For real.
So, yeah. Well, Chauncey Tellez and Dan B both want to know, would Julianne still have won? If Julianne would have won previously, had her chances to win this year decrease? Let me read that again. If Julianne had won previously, would her chances to win this year decrease? There we go.
It had been so long since her run of nominations.
Yeah.
That had she won any of them, I don't think it would have been that negatively impactful, especially if it was a supporting. If she had won for like Boogie Nights, zero impact. In fact, the opposite. It would have been a graduation.
Yeah, it would have been Cate Blanchett.
Absolutely that. But even if she had won for Far From Heaven, I think she could still have won here.
Yeah,
I think obviously voters would have felt some freedom, but I think she could have. Yeah.
Fritz said rank Julianne's leading nominations. There's only 3. I would say Far From Heaven, Still Alice, The End of the Affair, pretty easily.
That is the correct order.
Yeah. Josh and Ben Roberts both want to know, Julianne Moore became the latest actress to win a career award and then not receive any further nominations. What subsequent films would you nominate her for? And what's the closest she's come to a follow-up nom?
I mean, the answer is the same for both. It's May, December.
Yeah.
But I also love her in Gloria Bell.
Me too. I was going to say that.
So much.
Yes. The ghost of Glenda Miss Jackson, If You Nasty, said, if Maps to the Stars was all Moore had this year, would she have gone all the way with that performance instead? And which performance do you prefer if you've seen both?
She would not have gone in for Maps.
Yeah, I agree. At least at the time. Maybe now. I don't know.
Yeah, but it probably would have been supporting. Which do I prefer? That's crazy because it's such a great example of, the she has the range meme. I mean, it's who wouldn't want to act against Kristen Stewart in emotional drama and then fuck Robert Pattinson in a limo. She's
That's
basically
that's the dream
Mother
of every
Twilight. So
Twilight
I,
stan.
yeah,
Yeah.
I
So there you go.
exactly. I don't want to
It's
choose.
two apples and oranges. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, AJ Box said in a recent interview with Andy Cohen, Julianne Moore said that her favorite performance out of all her leading nominated roles was Far From Heaven. Which one of their Oscar nominated leading performances do you think these actresses would pick as their best one? Betty Davis, Shirley MacLaine, Ellen Burstyn, Jessica Lange, Jennifer Lawrence.
I think Jennifer Lawrence is kooky and
Yes.
she might say joy just to kind of fuck with people.
Oh my god.
Uh, but I think
Really?
I think she would say that to be a goof.
Mm,
But I think a real answer probably would be Winter's Bone.
yeah, I think so.
For Jessica Lange, I'm pretty sure it's Frances.
It is Frances. Yeah.
She has said as much.
Mm-hmm.
Ellen Burstyn, I'm leaning on Requiem,
Yes, she said so in her book, basically.
and she said so as much.
Yeah.
McLean, terms of endearment because it
Yeah.
got her the win. That she's not going to pick anything else. And for Betty Davis, I truly believe her real answer would be all of them.
All of them.
All of them. I can hear Johnny Carson asking her that and her saying that.
Yeah, I don't have anything to add to that. I agree. And I think the only one that, like, again, would have picked the one that they won for would be Shirley MacLaine.
Yep.
So there you go.
Yep.
Yeah. Celluloid Siren said, should Julianne have won for Far From Heaven and Boogie Nights so Marion could have her second win here?
Would
I don't know if that's exactly what that would happen, but we'll go with it.
Yeah, in the world where we're saying that Julianne Moore has 2 Oscars and they are for Far From Heaven and Boogie Nights, and Marion Cotillard has 2 and they're for Olivia and Rose in 2 days, 1 night, I am 100% on board with that.
Sure. Yeah. And certainly would have had an effect on the race if Julianne Moore had 2 Oscars.
Yeah.
Whether
I guess
would
that's
vote
one way of
yeah.
One way of reading that question, though, I'm not quite sure. It's the should that's kind of throwing me off. Like, should she have won, or should, as in, if this had happened?
Oh, yeah.
Those are 2 very different questions.
Yeah.
I'm choosing to answer it like the former.
Yeah. Amanda BW said, Julianne Moore won for playing a woman with Alzheimer's. What Best Actress lineup do you wish you could forget entirely? Love this question.
It's so funny and terrible. I kind of threw out a handful. I'm not super big on 2019, 2011, 2005. 1943 might be my answer, though, or 94.
Oh, yeah. Well, I have a few to add on to that. I would definitely say 1984.
I have that as well.
Get rid of every single one of those, save the Farm Girls. Sorry.
Oh
and Vanessa
God.
Redgrave and Judy Davis. Honestly, I just erased the whole category.
Yes.
1963, I don't really care for. I think that's kind of a weak year. And 2005, I just don't need it. Sorry,
Yep.
Reese.
Yep. Absolutely.
Yep. Jeremy Kaplan said, if Hollywood decided to produce a mashup called Still Alice Doesn't Live Here Anymore, would you want the lead role to go to Julianne Moore, Ellen Burstyn, or perennial woman robbed Mia Farrow, who starred in the 1990 film Alice?
So Mia Farrow with the chance to win or even be nominated is too hard to pass up. So
agreed. Mia Farrow all the way.
Yep.
Ben Roberts said, Cotillard has given 2 of the best performances to be nominated in this category. Why do you think her English language films have not been as successful in terms of awards? Would you nominate her for anything of her other roles? I don't know if that's English language or just any other roles, but
I think this is kind of complicated, and we did talk a little bit about it in talking about 2 days, 1 night in Hollywood, kind of maybe not knowing what to do with her. I do think I'll just kind of read how I wrote it down. Okay. Her native tongue, whether it's a naturalist environment like 2 days or a heightened one like Olivia and Rose, comes through more believably. I think there's sometimes a distance that people can create, myself included. I'm guilty of that. When somebody is speaking English as a second or a third language, that it can sometimes work against them, sometimes not. It doesn't
Mhm.
happen with Penelope Cruz. I think it can happen sometimes. I
Okay.
think that's it's a wired brain thing as an English language speaker myself.
hmm Yeah, it's definitely tough there. I mean, like, I really like her in Nine, for example, but I don't know if I would go so far as to nominate her necessarily.
Makes sense.
Uh, there isn't really an English language performance of hers that I thought really needed Oscar recognition. I guess maybe The Immigrant, but that was eligible this year, so I don't know if that's kind of a moot point because I actually prefer her in 2 Days, One Night.
Yes,
Um, Fritz said, was Marion being the first announced nominee instead of Jennifer Aniston one of the happiest Oscar moments?
it was a giant relief. And this is from way, way back in my early days with my friends that and I that do this when we're making our lists and then we get, really close to nomination day. We have everything listed alphabetically so that we have them checked off. It's like if this name gets announced, that means this person's snubbed. And so we're already there. Sometimes I
Mm-hmm.
wish that the nominations were announced out of alphabetical order
Like they
for
did
that
that one
reason.
time in
Yes.
2012, I think. Yeah.
Yes. That is real tension right there.
Mm-hmm.
They do it with Best Picture, um, to kind of throw that off a little bit. Um, but yeah, it was a great relief.
Yeah, very exciting, especially because like the other four were so locked in that it was going to be one or the other, or Amy Adams and Big Eyes, maybe for that matter. So it was always going to be that first one that was like, it reminds
Mhm.
me of like this past year where Annette Bening was announced first for Naiad, and everyone's like, oh, there it is. Yeah, just
Yep.
really funny. But yes, I greatly prefer that Marion got in instead of Jennifer Aniston. More on that later. Miles McHale said Marion joins former winners Sophia Loren and Penelope Cruz as multiple nominees in lead for non English language performances. What actress do you think could join them?
I think Isabelle Huppert could come back. I think Sandra Hüller is absolutely going to happen again.
Mm-hmm.
And I would love the return of Liv Ullmann.
Liv Ullmann? Wow. In her 90s?
Do it.
Absolutely.
Give her a Thelma.
Liv Ullmann's Thelma.
Yes.
Are you listening, Hollywood? Wow. I'm not going to be able to top that. All I said was Isabelle Huppert, but you just like Liv Ullmann just took me in another galaxy there. Wow. Yes. Ryan McQuaid said, a challenge. Say one nice thing about Felicity Jones. This could take a while. I'll let you take this one.
I don't understand the question and I won't respond to it.
Thank you. Moving on. Dan V and Miles McHale said, should Felicity have gone supporting?
Yes, but she still would have lost.
I think it's a borderline case for me personally, but she is so overshadowed by Eddie ultimately that it's like, it's no great loss if she is in supporting instead of lead.
Yeah.
That's what I would say. Yeah. Fritz said, what would have happened in this category and the supporting category if Felicity Jones had pulled an Alicia Vikander, which seems to mean going supporting for the Danish girl, like lead supporting conflict there. Yeah,
Yeah. I mean, like I said, I still think Arquette would have won
me
and
too.
Jones would have pushed out Laura Dern.
Yeah, pretty easily.
Yeah.
But what happens in lead? Is Jennifer getting in? Is Amy Adams getting in?
I think that's like a question later,
No,
but
that's later. We'll talk about that later too.
yeah.
All right. Andy Bayless said, love that Julianne has an Oscar, but Rosamund would have been an inspired win, a la Kathy Bates for Misery. What are your favorite nominations so far that are inspired for the Academy?
I don't know if I would include Kathy Bates in this for kind of what he's thinking. I get it.
Mm-hmm.
But these roles are exactly the kind that don't win. I mean, Bates won against Angelica Houston. Houston is the comparable to Pike here,
Yeah, that's true.
or Carrie Mulligan in Promising Young Woman. They don't. It's harder for them to win. But I get it. I get it.
Yeah.
Inspired nominations are a lot of the ones that won. Marissa Tomei,
Hmm.
Marcia Gay Harden, Quvenzhané Wallis. It's the one place where Joey Gentile and I agree like completely.
Wow.
And Anne Ramsey in Throw Mama from the Train, one of my favorite
Uh,
nominations of all time.
Good call. A lot of supporting actresses there. Um, I
We
just
love a good
look.
character actress.
I was just being snobbish and only did lead.
Oh, okay.
That's my sole focus. No, it's not that you did it wrong. I just was very narrow-minded in my whole thing. But I said, Sigourney Weaver and Aliens, for a nomination, just incredible. All
Yes.
the Keisha Castle Hughes, the Quvenzhané Wallis, Laura Linney and the Savages, I think, those ones that aren't widely predicted, but the Academy kind of goes out of their way to nominate, I always love. And depending on who you are, you could throw in Andrea Riseborough, but
I mean, since the question is what are your favorite? I don't
yeah,
know. Again, I guess we have to define what favorite is. Yeah, I mean
sure.
it's Riseborough is one of those like just it's an all-timer kind of thing.
Right. Well, Glorfindel of Gondolin said, I love Julianne and I'm happy she is an Oscar winner, but that Oscar belongs to Rosamund Pike. If Julianne was not in the picture, do you think it would have been hers? I must confess, I have my doubts. The Academy doesn't seem to favor evil characters like Amy, do they? And Stephen John kind of asked a similar question about her playing a female villain and whether that hurt her.
I basically just answered that in the last one with examples of where it doesn't pan out. Houston and Mulligan, those it's great for a nomination. It's not great for a win.
Yeah. I just don't think the industry was on board for Gone Girl either. And her performance, as much as moviegoers and fans and, Oscar watchers wanted it to be, there was a weird disconnect there. And sure, part of it may have been the villain factor and how difficult it was to sympathize with her, which we know is a double standard
Yep.
compared to Best Actor. But yeah.
I mean, Pike had the most. She had all the precursors, and she had the most non-major wins
Hmm.
of the five. So there's certainly an argument to be made once we get there if
Mm-hmm.
she was the runner-up.
Hmm. Ben Roberts said, Is Pike the greatest femme fatale character to be nominated for an Oscar? If not, who is?
Glenn Close in Fatal Attraction, Barbara Stanwyck in Double Indemnity, Gene Tierney in Leave Her to Heaven.
Mm-hmm. Very good.
Yeah.
Yeah. But Barbara Stanwyck in Double Indemnity is the ultimate.
It is the number one. Everybody
Yep.
else is after that.
Correct. Yep. Sophia Simonello said, Pick a Best Actress winner from every decade you've covered so far who you would like to see perform the cool girl monologue. Time to get creative.
Mine are so not creative,
Great.
unfortunately. I didn't do 1910s. I started at the 20s since the
Yeah, because there's
the
no
Oscars
Oscars of
are
the,
the 20s.
of
Yeah.
the 1910s.
So it's
Yes.
only Janet Gaynor and Mary Pickford. And since Janet Gaynor is my sworn enemy,
Yes.
Mary Pickford is my 2010s.
Let's go. I did not include the 20s, but I would also say Mary Pickford, just for fun.
There you
What
go.
about for the 30s?
30s feels, I mean, it could be a lot, but it feels like Betty Davis for me.
It's Betty Davis.
Yeah.
Especially if it was like in the era of human bondage where like she wasn't quite known yet and she really just came out of nowhere and,
And
did her
age
thing.
appropriate too,
Exactly. Yep.
because Amy Dunn is 35.
How about the 40s?
I went with Joan.
Yeah. Tempted to say Joan or Olivia de Havilland.
Yeah.
I am going to surprise some folks here and say Greer Garson. I
good.
think that kind of like patrician iciness she had would have really lent itself to Amy Dunn. And I could see her leaning into the sort of arched eyebrow thing she had going on too. Just saying.
I love
50s.
Okay.
Yes.
I mean, I have my pick, but I kind of kept looking. Obviously, this is not a Shirley Booth role. It's not a Judy Holliday role. It's not an Audrey Hepburn role. It's not a maybe Grace Kelly. If Grace
Oh
Kelly
boy.
was really adventurous and able, maybe.
Mm,
But I
wow.
ultimately I don't think so.
I went with Susan Hayward.
I went with Susan Hayward. Yeah, that
Yeah.
was
I think
it.
she eats that monologue up and she would have a
Yeah,
ball with that role.
yeah. It almost yeah. It's I love Joanne Woodward, but
Mm,
no, there's teeth
yeah,
in that moment,
exactly.
and she has the teeth.
Yep. The 60s is a little tough for me personally, but what did you have?
Um, I see. It feels like a too obvious choice, but I went with Elizabeth Taylor. But it just
Would it be incredible? I
it's
said Anne Bancroft,
that would
and especially her voice doing that monologue. I
yeah
would love that. There's a little cleverness to Anne too that would work. Yeah.
yeah. I think that's the right because yeah, again, sort of like a process of elimination. Julie Christie could be kind of fun.
Yeah. She's a little icy too.
Yeah,
That could
yeah. I
work.
think I think she might be able to, and there's
Mm-hmm.
even a bit of a visual
Yeah.
similarity, but not that it has to be that. But
Mm-hmm.
there's something there.
For the 70s, I'm not even going to beat around the bush. It's Faye Dunaway.
It's
Born
not
to
even.
play Amy. Yeah.
It's like literally the inspiration
Yeah.
was Faye Dunaway, so there's nobody else that it could be.
Yeah. I did also consider Glenda Jackson for that too, to be honest, because that
If
would
you're
be,
nasty, yeah.
hey. um, for the 80s, this is kind of an easy answer, but I just think Meryl. Because I
See,
could just picture that drawl, sort of sarcastic tone she has sometimes.
I wanted to have a little bit of fun with this, and I went with Cher.
Cher.
Yeah,
Oh my God.
yeah.
Wow.
I just think only because she would add a level of sarcasm that might be kind of
That's
fun.
true.
But I don't think Cher would be able to hide as much as
Yeah.
this character needs, and Meryl would be able to do. But I just got Cher locked in my head, and I couldn't get out of it.
I love that. I love that. For the 90s, interesting. A
Okay,
lot of options here.
this is the most bonkers decade to
Yeah,
pick
I
because
know.
nobody really makes a lot of sense. Then I landed on Gwyneth Paltrow
Okay.
because I just feel so the line in the movie. I wrote it down, but I'm gonna just paraphrase it now because so I don't pull through my papers. When Nick says, "I think about my wife's head," the paraphrasing like that. I just went to Seven, and I'm like, "Oh, this
Wow.
this could be kind of fun."
Wow, wow, wow. Okay.
Would Gwyneth Paltrow be able to really pull this off? Maybe not.
Maybe. I don't know.
But this is a weird decade to for this list.
I said Helen Hunt. Just for you.
That is demonic. That is demonic. What I really want to say, since this is Sophia's question and she's gonna hear this, what I want to say is Holly Hunter, which is going to be an inside joke that she's going to hate but love.
Okay.
But it would be
Would
horrible. Holly Hunter would be terrible as Amy
yeah.
Dunn. She's Kim Dickens in this
Yeah.
movie.
That's true. Very meta. Um and for the 2000s, who do we got?
Kidman, easy for me.
Okay. I thought of that as well, but as an alternative, I said Kate Winslet.
Oh wow.
Yeah. Because she also kind of played into that little cool girl aesthetic a little bit with Eternal Sunshine. So I'd love to see her sort of take that on, maybe.
And obviously it's funny that we have Reese here
Oh,
originally
yeah.
cast, and we have Charlize Theron as a possibility. And Theron definitely would be able to capture
hmm
tall, statuesque, icy. She's got that on lock.
Yeah. That was fun.
Yes.
Okay. Andrew Carden said, how many other noms did Gone Girl deserve?
Picture, director, actor, adapted screenplay, cinematography, editing, and score.
Yeah. I mean, I have most of those, except I don't have actor for Ben Affleck, even though I love him in it.
Yeah.
But yeah, the rest of those, like, it should have had like 7 or 8 nominations.
Oh, it's awful.
Yeah.
Absolute robbery.
Zoe G said, how close do you think Rosamund Pike was to a second Oscar nomination for I Care a Lot, for which she won a Golden Globe?
I don't think so. It's a very Globy win. It's a very Netflixy win. No.
I think she was like maybe 10th in
Sure.
Best Actress that year, something like that.
I'll give 10. I'll get
Yeah.
sure.
I think she maybe got closer with Saltburn last year.
Yes.
So that would have been the
And
one to get her second. Yeah. Joey Gentili has an interesting question here. Rosamund Pike being one of the 2 worst nominations in this category of the last decade is very on point. Not sure what that means. With that said, what would you give the worst of place for the 70s, 80s, 90s, 2000s?
The only thing that's on point is Joey asking this question. So he can take this nonsense back to the Cleveland Community Theater because I'm not fucking with it. Period. I'm not going to answer his little question. She's great. Right. It is not one of the worst nominations.
No, it's not. Let's move on. Miles McHale said, would Reese have been nominated if she had stayed cast as Amazing Amy?
I mean, this presumes that Wild doesn't exist, or yet.
Maybe.
I guess. I think maybe she could have.
Yeah. I just don't think it would have worked as well.
No, she wouldn't have been as good as Pike, and I think her stardom would have been a distraction.
Yeah, I agree. Richard Thompson said, Reese Witherspoon making prestige movies again and getting recognized like this? Hell yes. But the gap between this nomination and now is longer than the gap between her win and this follow-up. Will she be back?
Yeah, I think she will.
I think if she starts to prioritize film again, she'll be back, but she's only doing TV lately, so I don't know.
There's that. It's the Kidman of it all. Like, how many TV shows?
Same universe. Yeah. Ryan McQuaid said, which of these 2014 nominated roles would you have recast with Madonna?
I love this question. Thank you, Ryan, for asking it. Madonna being a slinky murderess in Gone Girl would be so fun because Gone Girl is basically the Bad Girl music video meets Body of Evidence. So she's kind of already there. Madonna out hiking and pulling off toenails would be really, really funny. Madonna being poor and begging for a job, also funny. Madonna being British and pushing Eddie Redmayne around, I live for that. But I want Madonna to do Still Alice.
Oh boy. There it is. What would that even look like? Wow.
It'd be horrible.
Oh dear. Yeah, I'll just leave it at Gone Girl and move on.
Yeah,
but I love your answer. Yeah. All right. Sean said 2014 was a very male-dominated Oscar year with only The Theory of Everything making it into picture out of this lineup. With an 8-nominee field, do you think any of these films would fill out those extra slots now?
It's sort of, it feels like Wild would be the closest to that, but since Moore was the winner, that would almost beg it to be Still Alice. But
I still think it's too. It wasn't thought of as a film more than just her performance. So I have my doubts.
Yeah, no, it's.
I think it's 2 days, 1 night.
Oh wow!
Because of the influence of international voters too.
And in a weird way, because it wasn't nominated for foreign language film that year, it was the submission for Belgium, but it did not make even the shortlist. It was crazy, which I think is another thing that adds to her successful nomination.
Captain Jimmy D said, in an alternate universe, would you be interested in seeing these films and performances adapted into a TV series, Broadway play, or musical?
Gone Girl the musical, give me that. I want that now. Theory of Everything probably would have benefited from limited series treatment, but I don't need to see more than 2 hours of Felicity Jones.
Right. Fair enough. I could see Still Alice as a play. I think that would make sense. I don't know if I would
Sure.
want to see it, but it could happen. Theory of Everything feels like play-ish, you know? Let's do a 2 days, 1 night musical.
Let's do it.
Why not? With an
Uh,
exclamation point at the end. 2 days, 1 night.
And that was the entire run.
Yeah. Yeah. And I will also add, I am glad that we were a little too early for Gone Girl to be adapted to a miniseries, because I'm almost positive it would be nowadays.
Yeah.
Just saying.
Yep. It would be.
Yeah. Adam said, which former Best Actress winners should have presented each nominee 2008 style?
This was tough because I wanted to pick people that didn't do it. So that leaves out Kidman to do Moore, or Sophia Loren to do Cotillard. So I picked Meryl Streep to do Julianne Moore just for the hours. I was very shady in having Julie Christie do Marion Cotillard for her presentation.
Wow. I love it.
Or Felicity Jones, Helen Mirren.
Sure.
Only because they were in The Tempest together. But Pike was tougher, but Jane Fonda needs to do this, and this is the one. And then for Reese, could also be Streep, but I just opted for Jennifer Lawrence.
Okay. Pretty good lineup. Yeah. Well, I said for Marion Cotillard, I said taking from the previous year's winner, Cate Blanchett, who famously loves her. So
yes.
that's it. For Felicity Jones, Felicity Jones, I said Emma Thompson, who worked with her on Brideshead Revisited as well.
That's good.
English Rose type of thing. Rosamund Pike, Faye Dunaway. Not even a question.
I guess I was not thinking of Faye just as like a possibility.
Well, she would be a possibility of a presenter in a few years, so.
It actually makes much more sense than what happened 2 years later. So yeah.
For Reese Witherspoon, I said Louise Fletcher, Cruel Intentions connection.
Wow. That's great. Oh, I love that.
Yeah. And then for Julianne Moore, I said Nicole Kidman, because always the hours. That's it.
Yeah.
Lazy. But there you go.
No, I love it.
Thank you. All right. Well, we don't have to spend too much time on this, but Chelsea said, would you prefer to see this group of women on Survivor or The Traitors? How would they fare on the show?
I said Survivor because I stopped watching The Traitors after like the first episode.
Oh, okay. Rude. There is also a very Survivor element to so many of these films that I think that makes sense for this group.
100%.
I think Sandra in 2 days, 1 night is like literally trying to get the votes on her side. So she definitely does decently well on Survivor, but also comes up short in the end because she can't get the votes.
I was gonna say if the question was Survivor players recast as these nominees, that could be fun.
Oh boy, that would be a good question.
That could be that's something else entirely. I do think based on characters that Reese and Rosamund would be both competition beasts and the best social players.
I think so too.
Pretty easily.
I think Alice struggles because she is not going to remember who to vote for.
She's the day 2 meltdown.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
Which is sad. I don't think she even passes the medical test to get cast, but
Well, I mean, it seems to be pretty open now and pretty easy to get in with a litany of mental issues. So
got me there. Jane Hawking, I don't know. I don't know if she has the killer instinct for the game. Maybe an early juror.
I can't even imagine like who she would be, what type of player she would be. I don't know.
Yeah.
She's supporting in her own story, so she wouldn't even have a place here.
Yeah. I think the winner is Cheryl Strayed.
Yeah.
Honestly.
Yep.
I think Amy is the biggest backstabber of them all and is bathing in blood by the end of that season. Just
Quite
backstabbing
literally.
every single person, maybe literally, yes.
Mhm.
And everyone at the end is like, we are not voting for you. You are psychotic.
Exactly.
So that's that.
Exactly.
Yep. Joey Gentili said recast these 2010s Oscar talents and Karen Black in these roles. Melissa Leo, Regina King, Florence Pugh, Glenn Close.
Much to nobody's surprise, I'm putting a stop to this Karen Black running gag, and I'm not going to answer.
Okay.
Somebody else can do that.
All right. Well, I'll do it then.
Okay.
For Sandra in 2 Days, One Night, I say Regina King. I think that'd be good.
I like it.
Jane Hawking, Florence Pugh. And maybe she'll do something with it.
Yeah.
Amy Dunn, gotta go with my girl Glennie. Gotta be Glennie. For Alice, I'll say Melissa Leo. And then Karen Black can go into the wild. That's it.
Okay.
Yep. A few more here. Andrew Carden, was Amy Adams or Jennifer Aniston sixth?
Adams.
Okay.
Yeah.
You think so?
I do. I think the Cake Aniston SAG stuff was really SAG specific. Yeah. And just her messiness around it.
Yeah.
There is that thing, and again, this is also a rather misogynistic look, because when men want an Oscar, they don't really suffer the slings and arrows of that judgment. But Kate Winslet has several women that show any type of thirst for it are kind of knocked down until voters are just kind of give up.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that was a bit of a perception of Aniston here.
Yeah, I think that's true. And I also just think Amy Adams being up on a stage accepting an award, the only person to do so other than Julianne Moore this season, she was probably sixth.
Yeah.
Captain Jimmy D said, this year Jennifer Aniston was so convinced she would receive an Oscar nomination that she scheduled a press junket at the Four Seasons Hotel to discuss it with the press. What can you say about her confidence? Do you think she ended up with a slice of cake as her consolation prize?
Yeah, I mean, just kind of jumping off of that, I definitely admire the confidence of it. It's very Joan Crawford, not going and then winning and then doing it from her bed. But
Yep.
You're not Joan Crawford. So it ended up being more like Catherine O'Hara for your consideration.
Yes, including the fact that the French girl got in.
Yes. It very, very, very much that.
Yeah. I love the confidence, even though I do have a little bit of secondhand embarrassment that it didn't actually pan out. Yeah. And then Juan Carlos Ojano, Jessica Chastain was originally positioned to campaign lead for her Most Violent Year. However, awards went to nominate her in supporting. Where would you put her, lead or supporting?
Lead. And I love that performance. Would have been super happy with her getting in.
I barely remember it, so I just said supporting because I just remember her one scene where she said this was very disrespectful with her little finger twirl.
That little finger.
Mm-hmm.
It's definitely I think very borderline. And
okay.
I'd have
to watch it again.
Either's the right answer, really.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's get to our final segment here where we will reveal who we think was the runner-up of this Best Actress race. Erik Anderson, who could possibly have been the runner-up to Julianne Moore.
So, I mean, I think we've kind of been leaning to it. I don't think that Felicity Jones was, like I said, in tandem to be able to have a co-lead win with Redmayne. And I don't even think she would have won supporting. So that makes it really, I think, more between Rosamund Pike and Reese Witherspoon. I don't think Marion Cotillard was quite there. I would probably put her in fourth.
Mm-hmm.
But if I'm looking at Pike and Witherspoon, the things that they did win, status, anything else, I think Witherspoon was the runner-up over Pike.
I was actually going to say the same thing, which surprised me that we came to the same conclusion, honestly, because it's kind of up in the air. I just think there are too many negatives with the other three. I think 2 Days, One Night wasn't seen very much compared to the other films. I think, yeah, the theory of everything. Felicity Jones, I just don't see that as a winning performance, even to get that kind of momentum. So with Rosamund Pike, I just don't know if the industry really cared enough about Gone Girl, and I feel like that was just dismissed as a populist kind of film and performance and pulpy and, having all these negatives to it, that I just think if we didn't have Julianne Moore here, there could have been a compelling narrative for Reese Witherspoon as this, like, okay, we're seeing you in a whole new light now. You've made this production company. This film is so centered entirely around you, and it would totally fall apart without you, that I think she could have stepped up and just won her second Oscar, as odd as that is to say. But I think from what I remember, she was always in that like second place from like even predictions of nominations and wins. So there you go. But
it's her movie. She is in literally every scene. There is no scene that she is not in. It is her movie. So in the absence of Julianne Moore, and let's say for argument's sake that Julianne Moore was not there, it's this same four and Amy Adams was in, Reese Witherspoon would still be the winner.
Yeah, interesting. Wow, what an interesting alternate history that would be.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, who would you have voted for from this lineup?
I would have voted for Moore, and without even a hesitation.
I would have joined the cool kids, I suppose, and gone with Rosamund Pike and Gone Girl, and it definitely would have emboldened me with the film not getting in everywhere else.
Mm-hmm.
That it's just like, I'm going to pour in all of my rage and vote for Rosamund. Because I think it's just the performance of the year in this category anyway.
I cannot and will not argue that for a moment.
Yeah.
Because,
well, yeah. Close with Marion, too. I think that's a phenomenal performance. Julianne Moore is really, really good. Love that performance. More than happy that she won that. And Reese is great, too. So it's a pretty good category on the whole.
It's a really, really good lineup.
Yeah.
One sneak.
Well, on that note, Erik, thank you so much once again for another fabulous, lengthy chat with me. Always such a pleasure having you on. Thank you for all of your support over the years. I really do appreciate it so much from you.
Thank you for having me back. I know that I've been on a lot, and I always appreciate it. And because I love talking with you about this for 3+ hours. I could do this all the time. I love it. And I love, how much I love your show. So it always means a great deal to me. And this is, you always let me be on episodes that mean a good deal to me personally.
Mm-hmm.
And I love that. I just really, really, really appreciate that.
Yeah. Well, I know that you have a lot to say.
Also that.
And I love to hear you contextualize awards within the context of everything else. You're one of the best out there, so I always appreciate it. Where can people find more of you?
Please and always, and thank you, hit up awardswatch.com anytime, all the time. Subscribe to the newsletter. It's 2 days a week. And you can find me on Twitter at awards_watch and AwardsWatch everywhere else. It is the season. It is time to go crazy.
It's all happening. Very exciting. Yes. Can't wait for another Felicity Jones nomination. All right.
It's going to happen.
It's happening, folks. Thank you all so much for listening. You could find me on all platforms at Kevin_Jacobson. Shows at Oscar Runner-Up on Twitter, Instagram, and the Runner-Up is. Rate, review, and subscribe if you haven't already. If you like what you heard, go to patreon.com/andtherunnerup is, where you can hear a whole bunch of bonus episodes. Next week, we'll be breaking down the Best Actress lineup of 2015, where the nominees were Cate Blanchett in Carol, Brie Larson in Room, Jennifer Lawrence in Joy, Charlotte Rampling in 45 Years, and Saoirse Ronan in Brooklyn, with the winner being Brie Larson. So with that, thanks again, Erik.
Thank you.
And I will bid you all adieu.